Lena Carter's hands trembled as she stared at the positive pregnancy test, her nursing textbooks forgotten on the cramped apartment floor. The father wasn't some college boyfriend or casual mistake. It was Dominic Russo, a name whispered in fear across the city's darkest corners. One night, one dangerous, unforgettable encounter that should have remained buried in memory. But secrets have a way of surfacing in his world, and when powerful men discover what you're hiding, disappearing becomes impossible. Now, with new life growing inside her and enemies she doesn't even know circling closer, Lena faces a terrifying truth. Running might have been her biggest mistake. Apocalypse. Before we begin this journey together, I invite you to join me until the very end. If you enjoy this story, please hit that like button and comment with your city below. I'd love to see how far this tale travels across the world. Now, let's step into Lena's world, where one secret will change everything. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital flickered overhead as Lena Carter pulled another double shift, her feet aching in worn sneakers that desperately needed replacing. At 24, she should have been celebrating her final year of nursing school, not counting pennies between clinical rotations and graveyard shifts at the emergency room registration desk. But life had stripped away the luxury of should-haves 3 years ago, when her parents' car plunged off a bridge in what officials called a tragic accident. Lena knew better. She'd seen the brake lines in the police photos, the ones they'd dismissed as weather damage. She'd heard her father's panicked voicemail the night before. "Lena, if anything happens to me, don't trust anyone who says it was random." Deleted from her phone by investigators who insisted she was imagining connections that didn't exist. "Carter, you okay?" Marcus, the night security guard, leaned against her desk with concern creasing his weathered face. "You look pale." "Fine," Lena lied, forcing a smile that felt like shattered glass. "Just tired." She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine since that night 4 months ago when grief and loneliness had driven her to accept a friend's invitation to an exclusive downtown club, the kind of place where velvet ropes separated ordinary people from those who moved through the world with dangerous confidence. Where she'd met him. Dominic Russo hadn't introduced himself with that name. In the low amber lighting of the VIP section, he'd simply been a man with storm gray eyes and a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. They'd talked for hours, about art, about loss, about the weight of expectations neither of them had asked for. When he'd offered to drive her home, she'd said yes. When he'd kissed her in the elevator of her building, she'd pulled him closer. When he'd asked if she was sure, she'd answered with certainty she hadn't felt in years. One night, one perfect, reckless escape from reality. She hadn't known who he was until the next morning, when she'd seen his face on the news during a federal investigation report. Dominic Russo, suspected organized crime figure. The man who'd held her with surprising gentleness was the same one prosecutors claimed controlled half the city's underground economy. Lena had blocked his number, changed her routine, and tried to forget. But biology doesn't care about fear or common sense. "I'm taking my break," she told Marcus, grabbing her backpack and heading toward the employee bathroom with mechanical precision. Inside the locked stall, Lena pulled out the pregnancy test she'd bought from a 24-hour pharmacy 3 blocks away, paying cash to avoid any digital trail. Her hands shook as she followed the instructions, then waited the longest 3 minutes of her life while hospital sounds echoed beyond the bathroom door, codes being called, machines beeping, life and death dancing their eternal waltz. 2 pink lines. Positive. The test clattered into the sink as Lena's knees buckled. She caught herself against the cold porcelain, forcing air into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not with him. A baby. Dominic Russo's baby. The logical part of her brain, the part that had carried her through organic chemistry and anatomy courses, began calculating options with clinical detachment. She was barely surviving on her own. Student loans already buried her in debt that would take decades to repay. A child would derail everything she'd worked for, every sacrifice she'd made since her parents died. But beneath the panic, something else stirred, something that felt dangerously like hope. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about your situation." Lena's blood turned to ice. Nobody knew. She'd been so careful, unless Another text. The coffee shop on 5th, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. Her fingers moved on instinct, typing back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who knows what Dominic Russo did to your parents." The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against the tile floor. Everything tilted sideways, the bathroom walls pressed inward. Somewhere distant, someone knocked on the door, asking if she was all right. But Lena couldn't form words past the scream building in her throat. What had her one night with Dominic really been? Coincidence? Or something far more sinister? 3 days later, the coffee shop on 5th Street occupied a corner building that had seen better decades, its brick facade weathered by city pollution and time. Lena arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the back exit with clear sightlines to both entrances. Lessons learned from her father, a police detective who taught her to always know where the exits were. She'd spent 72 hours researching everything she could find about Dominic Russo. Most articles focused on federal investigations that never quite stuck, charges filed and mysteriously dropped, witnesses who recanted testimony or disappeared entirely. But between the lines of legal jargon and journalistic caution, a picture emerged. A man who'd inherited his father's empire at 22 and transformed it from street-level violence into something more refined, more dangerous. Legitimate businesses that laundered money, political connections that made him untouchable, a reputation for swift, brutal responses to betrayal, and absolutely nothing connecting him to her parents' deaths. Until now. The door chimed. A woman entered, mid-40s, sharp suit, federal agent written in every economical movement. She scanned the room with professional thoroughness before her gaze locked on Lena. Recognition sparked, followed by something that looked almost like pity. Lena Carter. The woman sat without invitation, sliding a leather folder across the scarred table. Special Agent Victoria Walsh, FBI. Thank you for coming. You said you know what Dominic Russo did to my parents. Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. Prove it. Walsh opened the folder, revealing photographs that made Lena's stomach lurch. Her father's car, twisted metal on rocks below the bridge, close-ups of the brake lines, clearly cut. And then, surveillance photos of a man she'd never seen, entering an automotive shop her father had used regularly. Marco Vitelli, Walsh said quietly. Dominic Russo's head of security at the time. He died 6 months after your parents, killed in what was ruled a robbery gone wrong. She paused, letting that sink in. We believe Russo ordered the hit as a message to your father, who was investigating connections between Russo's shipping companies and human trafficking operations. The coffee shop sounds faded. The hiss of the espresso machine, conversations at nearby tables, traffic beyond the windows. Everything narrowed to the photographs scattered between them, like evidence of a crime Lena had been trying to deny for 3 years. Why are you telling me this now? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Because we've been watching Dominic Russo for 8 years, and we've never gotten close enough to make anything stick. His organization is tight, loyal, terrified. Walsh leaned forward, intensity sharpening her features. But 4 months ago, something changed. He's been distracted, making uncharacteristic mistakes, and our surveillance indicates he's been looking for someone. The implication hung between them, heavy as gravity. You think he's looking for me? I know he is. Walsh pulled out another photo, this one recent, grainy, taken from a distance. Lena leaving her apartment building. He has people watching you, Lena, has had for weeks. It's only a matter of time before he makes contact. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. What do you want from me? The same thing you want. Justice for your parents. Walsh's voice softened, becoming almost human beneath the federal agent exterior. Work with us. When Russo contacts you, and he will, let us wire you up. Get him talking about his operations, his network. Give us something we can use to bring him down. You want me to be bait. I want to give you a chance to make your parents' deaths mean something. Walsh pulled out a business card, pressing it into Lena's palm. You don't have to decide right now, but when Dominic Russo comes for you, and Lena, he will come. You'll need to choose. Help us put him away, or become another person who knows too much about a very dangerous man. She stood, leaving the folder of photographs on the table like evidence of a future Lena couldn't escape. Call me when you're ready, and Lena, whatever you think happened between you two, whatever you felt, it wasn't real. Men like Russo don't do random. They don't do coincidence. Think about that. The door chimed again as Walsh disappeared into the afternoon crowd, leaving Lena alone with photographs of her parents' destroyed car and the growing certainty that everything she'd believed about that night 4 months ago had been carefully constructed lies. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Stop digging into things that will only hurt you. Then seconds later, I'll be in touch soon. We need to talk. Dominic. He knew about the meeting. Probably had someone watching her right now, reporting every movement, every conversation. The net was tightening, and Lena sat at the center with a secret growing inside her that would either save her or destroy them both. 2 weeks later. The diner where Lena had picked up weekend shifts to supplement her hospital income occupied a forgotten strip mall on the city's east side, far from the gleaming downtown towers where men like Dominic Russo conducted their legitimate business. It served burned coffee and passable pancakes to third-shift workers, insomniacs, and people who had nowhere else to be at 3 a.m. Lena had chosen it deliberately. Anonymous, unremarkable. A place where she could disappear into the fluorescent lighting and grease-stained menus. She'd stopped going to her regular coffee shop, varied her route to the hospital, and kept Agent Walsh's card in her pocket like a talisman against the inevitable. But inevitability has a way of finding you, regardless of precautions. The dinner rush had ended hours ago. Only a handful of customers remained. A truck driver nursing his 4th cup of coffee, 2 teenagers who'd clearly been fighting, and an elderly woman who came in every Thursday to eat pie and read romance novels. Lena was refilling sugar dispensers when the door chimed. She didn't need to look up to know. The atmosphere shifted, pressure changing like a storm front moving through. The truck driver's conversation with himself stopped mid-sentence. Even the teenagers fell silent, some primal instinct recognizing apex predator when it entered their space. Dominic Russo stood in the doorway like a photograph that had stepped out of her memory and into devastating reality. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months, tailored to perfection but rumpled just enough to suggest he'd come straight from wherever powerful men conducted their dangerous business. His storm gray eyes found her across the diner with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. Lena. Her name sounded different in his voice than it had that night, less like poetry, more like a statement of ownership. "Run!" her instinct screamed, but her feet had forgotten how to move. He crossed the diner with economical grace, sliding into a booth near the back with clear sight lines to both exits. A humorless smile touched his lips as he gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit, please." "I'm working." "No, you're hiding." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, setting it on the table between them. "Badly." Lena's vision tunneled. The pregnancy test she'd thrown away, wrapped carefully in newspaper, disposed of in a dumpster 3 blocks from her apartment 2 weeks ago, sat on the chipped formica like an accusation. "That's..." Her voice failed. "Yours." Dominic's expression remained neutral, but something dangerous moved behind his eyes. "My people are thorough. When someone starts following you, federal agents, for instance, I make it my business to understand why. Imagine my surprise when routine surveillance uncovered this in your trash." The diner spun. Lena grabbed the booth's edge, knuckles white against red vinyl. "You've been watching me. Since the morning you left without saying goodbye." No apology in his tone, just statement of fact. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you blocking my number? Changing your patterns? Running?" "I wasn't..." "Don't lie to me, Lena." The temperature dropped 20 degrees. "I've had people lying to me since I was old enough to understand what my last name meant. You're scared. I understand that. But what I need to understand is why you're having conversations with FBI agents about me while carrying what might be my child." "Might be." The words landed like a slap. "Is the baby mine?" Dominic asked quietly, but his tone carried the weight of empires. Simple question, yes or no. Every instinct screamed at Lena to deny it, to protect the life growing inside her from the man who'd allegedly ordered her parents killed. But looking into his eyes, she found herself caught between 2 impossibilities. The federal agent's certainty that Dominic was a murderer, and the man who'd held her that night with hands that knew both violence and tenderness. Why? The question came out broken. Why that night? Agent Walsh said men like you don't do random, don't do coincidence. So what was I? A target? Leverage? Another chess piece in whatever game you're playing? Something flickered across Dominic's face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd challenge him instead of simply answering. He leaned back, studying her with the intensity of someone solving a complex equation. You think I orchestrated our meeting? Did you? No. The single word carried absolute conviction. That night at the club, I was there because my brother was getting married and I needed distance from the celebration. You were there because... He paused, something like regret crossing his features. Because you were grieving, and grief makes people do reckless things, like talk to strangers about loss and art and what it means to carry names that weigh more than they should. You knew who I was. Not a question. I knew your parents died in what was ruled an accident. I knew your father was a detective who'd been investigating several cases that peripherally involved my business interests. What I didn't know, what I swear on everything I value, Lena, was that you would become this. He gestured between them, encompassing everything unsaid. Someone I can't stop thinking about. Someone I'd burn the city down to protect. The elderly woman at the counter dropped her fork. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. Pretty words, Lena said, but her voice shook. Agent Walsh showed me photos. Marco Vitelli entering the shop that serviced my father's car. Marco Vitelli, your head of security, who died 6 months later. She said you ordered the hit as a message. Marco Vitelli was executed because he went rogue. Dominic's voice went arctic. He thought targeting a cop's family would pressure your father to back off an investigation. He was wrong. I don't kill innocent people to make points, Lena. I kill people who betray my explicit orders. So you admit you had him killed? I admit I maintain order in my organization. When someone violates the rules, there are consequences. No apology, no justification, just brutal honesty. But I didn't order your parents' deaths. In fact, I've spent considerable resources over the past 3 years trying to find out who did. The ground beneath Lena's feet dissolved. What? Dominic pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table. On the screen, files, documents, private investigator reports detailing forensic analysis of her parents' car, witness interviews the police had never conducted, security footage from the bridge the night they died showing another vehicle forcing them off the road. Your father wasn't investigating my shipping companies, Dominic said quietly. He was investigating a trafficking ring run by the Antonov family, Russian mob trying to expand into my territory. They killed him to send me a message, then framed it to look like my work. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something that looked almost like pain. I've been hunting them for 3 years. I'm close. Very close. Lena's hands trembled as she scrolled through the files. Police reports the authorities had buried. Witness statements that were never followed up. A pattern of corruption that suggested someone in law enforcement was protecting the Antonovs. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. That night, you knew who I was, knew what happened to them, and you were the first person in years who looked at me and saw something other than a last name and a reputation. Dominic's voice carried unexpected vulnerability. For a few hours, I was just a man talking to a remarkable woman about things that mattered. I didn't want to poison that with business, with blood. But you came looking for me after. Because you disappeared, and I don't like mysteries. He gestured to the pregnancy test. And now there's this. So I'll ask again. Is the baby mine? The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, traffic passed like the world was still normal, still operating according to rules that made sense. But inside this booth, everything Lena thought she knew had been turned inside out. Yes, she heard herself say, the baby is yours. Dominic closed his eyes, jaw tightening. When he opened them again, something fundamental had shifted. Then everything changes. You understand that? Every rule I've lived by, every line I've drawn, it all changes now. It doesn't matter what you want. Not cruel, just factual. The moment you confirm that child is mine, you became the most valuable target in this city. My enemies will use you to get to me. The FBI will use you to try to bring me down. And I—" He stood, towering over her with barely restrained intensity. "I will do whatever it takes to keep both of you safe, even if you hate me for it. You can't just—" The diner's front window exploded in a spray of glass and gunfire. Dominic moved before Lena could process the sound, throwing her to the floor and covering her body with his as bullets shredded the booth above them. The truck driver screamed. The teenagers dove behind the counter. The elderly woman sat frozen, her romance novel still open to a scene about star-crossed lovers. "Stay down," Dominic ordered, pulling a gun from somewhere beneath his jacket with practiced ease. "Don't move, don't speak, don't even breathe loud." More gunfire. The diner's lights shattered. In the sudden darkness, broken only by streetlights through the destroyed window, Lena saw shadows moving outside. Multiple shooters, professional, coordinated. Dominic returned fire with cold precision, each shot deliberate. Someone outside screamed. The shadows scattered. In the distance, sirens began to wail. "We're leaving!" Dominic hauled Lena up, keeping himself between her and the window as he guided her toward the kitchen. "Back exit. Move." "The other people are not carrying my child." He practically carried her through the kitchen, past the terrified cook crouched beneath the grill. The back door led to an alley where a black SUV sat idling, engine running, driver invisible behind tinted windows. Dominic shoved her into the back seat with barely controlled violence, following immediately and slamming the door. "Go! Now!" The SUV peeled out before Lena could even process what was happening. She twisted to look through the rear window, seeing police cars screaming toward the diner, seeing the shattered glass and bullet holes, seeing her carefully constructed anonymity destroyed in a hail of gunfire. "Who was that?" Her voice sounded distant, shock setting in. "Who just tried to kill us?" "I don't know yet." Dominic's jaw clenched as he reloaded his weapon with mechanical efficiency. "But I will, and when I do, they'll wish they'd never heard your name." The SUV merged into late-night traffic, just another vehicle in a city full of them. Lena's hands moved unconsciously to her stomach, to the life growing there that had just become the epicenter of a war she didn't understand. "Where are we going?" Dominic met her eyes in the passing streetlights, and she saw the truth before he spoke it. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can protect you." He paused, and what came next sounded almost like an apology. "Home. The estate materialized out of darkness like a fortress from another era. High walls topped with security cameras, gates that opened with facial recognition, guards that melted into shadows as the SUV passed. Lena had expected something ostentatious, a mob boss's cliché of marble and gold. Instead, she found herself looking at a modernist structure of glass and steel that blended seamlessly into manicured grounds, elegant without being showy. Dangerous in its understated power. Inside, Dominic guided her through doors that locked behind them with quiet finality. "We'll talk after I make sure this place is secure." He disappeared into another room, speaking rapid-fire Italian into his phone. Lena stood in an entry hall that could have graced an architectural magazine, feeling blood dry on her hands where she'd caught herself against broken glass, feeling the baby flutter inside her like a question she couldn't answer. A woman appeared from somewhere deeper in the house, older, elegant, with eyes that had seen too much and learned to keep secrets. "You must be Lena. I'm Sophia. I run Dominic's household." No judgment in her tone, just practical assessment. "Let me show you where you can clean up." Lena followed numbly, cataloging details her nursing training flagged as important. Security keypads at every door, bulletproof windows, medical supplies visible in cabinets designed to look decorative. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress built by someone who understood that safety was an illusion maintained through constant vigilance. The guest room Sophia led her to could have been mistaken for a luxury hotel suite. King bed, attached bathroom, French doors opening onto a private terrace. Beautiful cage, but still a cage. "There are clothes in the closet," Sophia said gently. "Your size, I believe. Dominic had them brought in this afternoon." He knew. Lena turned to face her. "He knew he was bringing me here before the shooting even happened. He knew someone would make a move soon. Better to have you here when it happened than watching you die in some diner while his child died with you." Sophia moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. Whatever you think about Dominic, whatever the FBI has told you, he doesn't bring people here. This home has never had a woman in it, never had anyone he cares about behind these walls. Think about what that means." Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with blood-stained clothes and impossible choices. The shower ran scalding hot. Lena stood beneath it until her skin turned red, trying to wash away the smell of gunpowder and fear, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted completely off its axis. Through the steam, she could see her reflection in the bathroom mirror, bruises forming on her shoulder where Dominic had shoved her down, scrapes on her palms from the diner floor. Evidence that she'd survived when she probably shouldn't have. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly. Soft fabrics, quality construction, labels she couldn't afford in a lifetime of nursing. Lena chose the simplest option, leggings and an oversized sweater, and emerged from the bedroom to find Dominic waiting in the hallway. He'd changed too. No suit now, just dark jeans and a black t-shirt that showed the edge of a tattoo on his left forearm. Without the tailored armor of his business clothes, he looked younger, more human, more dangerous. "Come," he said quietly. "We need to talk." He led her to a study that smelled of leather and old books, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. At her look, he said, "It's non-alcoholic. I had Sophia stock it when I learned about the baby." This afternoon, he'd known for hours before confronting her, had time to prepare, to plan, to build whatever cage he intended to keep her in. "Why am I here?" Lena took the glass but didn't drink. "Really here? Not the protection story, the truth." Dominic sat in a leather chair that had probably cost more than her car, studying her with those storm gray eyes. "Because in my world, there are 3 things people value above everything else: money, power, and leverage. You just became all 3. The FBI wants to use you to bring me down. My enemies want to use you to hurt me, and I—" He paused, something raw crossing his face. "I want you safe, which means keeping you where I can control every variable. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "There's a difference. Prisoners have sentences that end. Protection lasts as long as the threat exists. And who decides when the threat is over? You? Who else? Not arrogant, just honest. You think those shooters tonight were random? Someone knew where to find you. Someone knew you were connected to me. And someone decided you were worth the risk of attacking in a public place." His jaw tightened. That kind of move doesn't happen without serious motivation. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. "Agent Walsh, she said you had people watching me. Maybe one of your people talked." "My people would die before betraying me. Absolute certainty. Which means someone else has been watching, following you, probably since that FBI agent made contact." He pulled out his phone, showing her surveillance footage of the coffee shop meeting. "I've had this footage analyzed. There's a sedan parked 3 cars down that doesn't belong to the neighborhood. 2 occupants, professional-grade telephoto lens. They followed Walsh there, which means they're watching the FBI." Lena's nursing training kicked in, analyzing symptoms to reach diagnosis. Someone inside the investigation, or someone tracking the investigators. Smart girl. Approval colored his tone. "Now you're starting to understand how deep this goes. The Antonov family has resources, connections, people on payrolls from City Hall to federal agencies. They've been trying to expand into my territory for 5 years. Your father got too close to their trafficking operation. They eliminated him. Marco went rogue trying to use it against them. I eliminated Marco, and now they know about me, about the baby." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "They think hurting me hurts you." "They're right." Dominic stood, moving to the window overlooking his fortress grounds. "Which is why you stay here, behind walls and guards and every security measure money can buy, until I eliminate the threat, permanently." "You mean kill them?" "I mean end the problem in whatever way ensures you and my child live to see tomorrow." He turned, backlit by moonlight, looking like some dark angel of vengeance. "I won't apologize for protecting what's mine, Lena. Not to you, not to the FBI, not to anyone. I'm not yours." But the words lacked conviction. "You're carrying my child. That makes you mine in every way that matters. He crossed the room, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I know what you think of me, what Walsh told you. Organized crime figure, murderer, monster. Maybe all of that's true. But I'm also the only thing standing between you and people who'll cut that baby out of you just to watch me bleed. So you can hate me if you want, but you'll do it from behind these walls, where you're safe. The baby chose that moment to flutter again, tiny movements that felt like butterfly wings against her palm. Dominic's eyes tracked the gesture, something fierce and possessive crossing his features. Can I? He gestured toward her stomach, and the question was so unexpected, so human, that Lena found herself nodding. His hand settled over hers, large and warm and scarred from violence she could only imagine. They stood like that in the moonlight, connected by the life growing between them, while outside the fortress walls a city full of enemies plotted their next move. I'll find who sent those shooters, Dominic said quietly, and I'll make sure they never threaten you again. That's a promise. And Agent Walsh, the FBI, will have to get in line behind everyone else trying to use you. He stepped back, professional distance replacing the moment of vulnerability. You'll stay in this wing of the house. Sophia will get you anything you need, doctor appointments, prenatal care. I've arranged everything with the best specialists in the city. They'll come here. I have school, clinical rotations. My life is on hold until this is resolved. Not negotiable. I'll make sure you don't fall behind in your studies. Private tutors, whatever you need. But you don't leave these grounds until I say it's safe. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to scream that he couldn't just lock her away like some princess in a tower. But the memory of gunfire and shattered glass was too fresh, and the baby fluttering inside her was too precious to gamble with on pride alone. How long? The question came out smaller than she'd intended. As long as it takes. Dominic moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. The same gesture Sophia had made, and Lena wondered if it was genetic or learned. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about everything else. What you need to know. What comes next? Dominic. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate and dangerous. Did you love her? The woman who made you decide never to bring anyone to this house? He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, there was never a woman. I meant it literally. I've never brought anyone here because this place is the only thing that's truly mine. Not my father's legacy, not the empire I inherited. Mine. He met her eyes across the darkened study. Until now. Until you. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone in a stranger's home that was somehow both prison and sanctuary, holding a baby that would bind her to a man who commanded violence with one hand and showed her glimpses of something deeper with the other. Her phone buzzed. Agent Walsh. Are you safe? We heard about the shooting. Call me. Lena stared at the message, then at the fortress walls visible through the study windows, then at her own reflection in the darkened glass. Two paths stretched before her: cooperate with the FBI and try to bring down the father of her child, or trust the word of a man who dealt in secrets and survival. Outside, guards patrolled the grounds with military precision. Inside, Sophia appeared in the doorway with warm milk and concern written in every line of her face. And somewhere in this fortress built on blood and necessity, Dominic Russo was making plans to eliminate threats Lena couldn't even see. She deleted Walsh's message without responding. Tomorrow would bring new choices, new complications, new impossible decisions. But tonight, for the first time since seeing that positive pregnancy test, Lena felt something that almost resembled safety, even if it came wrapped in bulletproof glass and guarded by men who killed without hesitation. The baby fluttered again, stronger this time. A tiny life caught between two worlds, belonging to both and neither. Just like her. Morning came too early, announced by birdsong that seemed impossibly cheerful given the circumstances. Lena woke disoriented, reaching for the familiar lumpy mattress of her apartment before reality crashed back. The shooting, the fortress, the man who'd claimed her as his to protect whether she wanted it or not. The guest room looked different in daylight. Less like a luxury hotel, more like a carefully constructed illusion of normalcy. Fresh flowers on the dresser that someone must have placed while she slept. A breakfast tray beside the bed with still steaming coffee, decaf, she noted, and food arranged with the kind of attention that spoke of professional kitchen staff rather than microwaved leftovers. Her phone sat charging on the nightstand, notifications multiplying like aggressive weeds. 7 missed calls from the hospital asking why she'd missed her shift. 3 from her roommate demanding to know where she'd disappeared to. Dozens of texts from classmates who'd seen news coverage of the diner shooting and wondered if she was okay. And 1 message from Agent Walsh, time-stamped an hour ago. "We need to talk. Today." This situation is escalating faster than you realize. Lena was still staring at the screen when someone knocked. Sophia entered before she could respond, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested decades of managing other people's chaos. "Good morning. I trust you slept well?" The older woman began opening curtains, flooding the room with light that made Lena wince. "Dominic wanted you to know he's handling the aftermath from last night. The police have been told you were an innocent bystander caught in gang crossfire. Your name won't appear in any reports." "How convenient." Lena set down her phone. "Does he control the police department too?" "He has relationships with people who value discretion." Sophia's tone remained neutral. "Eat your breakfast. The doctor will be here in an hour for your first prenatal appointment." "I have a doctor at the university clinic." "You had a doctor at a public clinic where anyone could access your medical records and use them against you." Sophia moved to the closet, pulling out clothes with the same precision she did everything else. "Now you have Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who's delivered babies for 3 presidents and more celebrities than I can count. She's also signed more non-disclosure agreements than most lawyers see in a lifetime." The casual mention of the powerful and famous should have been impressive. Instead, it just reinforced how completely Lena's life had been hijacked. She'd gone from struggling nursing student to kept woman in the span of 1 violent night. What if I don't want any of this? The question came out quieter than intended. The private doctors, the security, the fortress. What if I just want my normal life back? Sophia paused, something almost like sympathy crossing her carefully maintained expression. "Then you'd be dead within a week, and your baby with you. I know that sounds harsh. I know you want to believe the world is kinder than it is, but Dominic's enemies don't negotiate, don't show mercy, and they certainly don't care about an innocent nursing student who happened to get caught in the crossfire." She set the chosen outfit on the bed. Maternity clothes, Lena realized, her size, but designed for a growing belly. Your normal life ended the moment you conceived his child. The only question now is whether you survive long enough to raise that child in whatever version of normal you can build from the ashes. The brutal honesty was almost refreshing after a lifetime of people dancing around hard truths. "Does it get easier?" Lena heard herself ask, living in his world. "No." Sophia moved toward the door. "But you get stronger, and if you're smart, you learn to use his resources to build something that matters. That baby you're carrying? It could either be another casualty of this life, or it could be the thing that finally gives Dominic a reason to choose differently. Which outcome you get depends partly on him." She paused. "But mostly on you." Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with breakfast, designer maternity clothes, and the weight of impossible expectations. The shower ran hot while Lena tried to process everything. Last night felt surreal in daylight. The gunfire, Dominic's cold precision returning fire, the way he'd covered her body with his without hesitation. Whatever else he was, however many crimes Walsh could attribute to his name, he'd been willing to die to protect her. That had to mean something, didn't it? She was toweling off when voices drifted through the closed bathroom door. Male, speaking rapid Italian with the kind of intensity that suggested argument rather than casual conversation. Lena cracked the door, listening. "Reckless bringing her here. Every enemy you have now knows exactly where to strike." A voice she didn't recognize, younger than Dominic's, angry, which is why she's behind these walls instead of bleeding out in some diner. Dominic's voice, cold as winter. "We've had this conversation, Marco. The decision is made." "Marco's dead. You killed him for going after her parents." A pause. "I'm Alessandro, your brother, and I'm telling you this is a mistake." "Brother." Lena's hand froze on the doorknob. She hadn't known Dominic had family beyond the father whose empire he'd inherited. "Alessandro." Dominic's tone shifted, becoming almost gentle. "I appreciate your concern, but Lena stays." End of discussion. She's working with the FBI. You saw the surveillance footage. I saw an FBI agent approaching a scared woman whose parents were murdered and offering her a narrative that made sense of senseless violence. Dominic's footsteps crossed the guest room, moving closer to where Lena hid. Walsh is playing a long game, trying to turn Lena against me by feeding her half-truths and convenient lies. It won't work. How can you be sure? Because I've spent 3 years hunting the people who actually killed her parents, and I'm close enough that they're getting desperate. The attack last night wasn't random. It was a message. They know about the baby, they know Lena matters to me, and they're testing my defenses. Silence. Then Alessandro, quieter. And when they attack again? When they realize brute force won't work and they try subtlety instead? What's your plan then? To eliminate the threat before it reaches her. Absolute certainty. The Antonov family is operating on borrowed time. I've got people inside their organization. I know their supply routes, their business partners, their connections to legitimate enterprises. In 3 days, I'm handing everything to federal prosecutors. Not Walsh's team, but people who can't be bought. Let the government destroy them legally while I make sure anyone who escapes justice finds a different kind. Lena's blood ran cold. He was planning to have people killed, planning it calmly, methodically, like discussing quarterly earnings reports. And the woman? Alessandro asked. After the threat's gone, after the baby's born, what happens to her? The pause stretched so long Lena thought Dominic wouldn't answer. Then, I don't know, for the first time in my life, I don't have a plan for what comes next. I just know I can't let her go. That's called love, brother. Father would say it's a weakness. Father died alone in a prison hospital, betrayed by the men he'd trusted most. Bitterness colored Dominic's voice. I'm not making his mistakes. This child will grow up knowing its father. Lena will have whatever life she wants, whatever that looks like. Even if... He stopped. Even if it doesn't include me. Lena pressed her hand against her mouth, stifling the sound trying to escape. This wasn't the cold mob boss Walsh had described. This was a man grappling with something he couldn't control or command. You're in deeper than you think, Alessandro said quietly. Be careful, Dominic. Women like her, good women, innocent women, they change men. And changed men make mistakes. Then I'll make them with my eyes open. Footsteps receded. Get back to monitoring the Antonovs' movements. I want to know every breath they take. A door closed. Silence fell like snow. Lena emerged from the bathroom to find Dominic standing at the window, silhouette dark against morning light. He didn't turn, but his shoulders tensed in a way that suggested he knew she'd been listening. How much did you hear? Not accusatory, just curious. Enough. She moved to the breakfast tray, forcing herself to eat because the baby needed nutrition, even if her stomach was twisted in knots. You're planning to kill them, the Antonovs. I'm planning to ensure they can never hurt you or our child. If that requires killing, then yes. He turned, meeting her eyes with brutal honesty. Does that shock you? Make you want to run back to Agent Walsh and her promises of justice through proper channels? It should. Lena set down the fork, appetite gone. Everything about this should terrify me. The violence, the casual way you talk about murder, the fact that I'm essentially a prisoner here. But instead I keep thinking about how you threw yourself on top of me when the shooting started. How you've spent 3 years hunting my parents' real killers when the police gave up after 3 weeks. How you're arranging prenatal care from doctors who deliver presidents' babies. She wrapped her arms around herself. Walsh said you don't do random, don't do coincidence. She's right, but neither do I. So what I can't figure out is whether you're the monster she says you are, or something far more complicated. Dominic crossed to her, moving with that predatory grace that suggested violence barely restrained. I can be both. Most people are, in the right circumstances. The difference is whether you choose to see the complication or just the convenient label. And what do you see when you look at me? The question escaped before Lena could stop it. Another complication? A problem to be managed? His hand rose, hesitated, then settled against her cheek with surprising gentleness. I see the first person in a decade who looked at me and saw someone worth having a conversation with. I see a woman strong enough to survive losing her parents and still choose to spend her life helping others. I see, his thumb traced her jawline. I see the mother of my child, and that changes everything. The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility and danger. Lena found herself leaning into his touch despite every logical reason not to, found herself wondering what might have developed between them if their worlds hadn't been built on such different foundations. Then someone knocked, shattering the spell. "Dr. Chen is here," Sophia called through the door. "Ready when you are." Dominic stepped back, professional distance replacing intimacy, so smoothly it felt rehearsed. "I'll leave you to your appointment. Sophia will be with you the whole time." He moved toward the door. "And Lena, whatever Walsh contacts you with today, and she will contact you, remember that her job is to use you to bring me down. She doesn't care if that puts you in more danger. She just wants the win." Then he was gone, leaving Lena to face a doctor who probably knew more state secrets than most intelligence agencies, and a future that grew more complicated by the hour. Dr. Elizabeth Chen turned out to be a tiny woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and the kind of calm competence that came from delivering babies in war zones and palace rooms with equal professionalism. She set up portable ultrasound equipment in the guest room with practiced efficiency, asking questions about Lena's medical history while Sophia watched from the corner like a particularly elegant guard dog. "First pregnancy?" Dr. Chen asked, applying gel to Lena's stomach. "Yes." "Any complications so far? Bleeding, cramping, unusual symptoms?" "Just morning sickness, and apparently people shooting at me in diners." The words came out more bitter than intended. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. "Well, the baby seems unaffected by last night's excitement. Strong heartbeat, appropriate size for dates." She angled the screen so Lena could see. "There. That flutter is your baby's heart." The image was grainy, abstract, barely distinguishable from the surrounding tissue, but the rhythmic pulse of that tiny heart hit Lena with unexpected force. Real. Her baby was real, growing inside her, depending on her to make choices that would keep it safe. "Everything looks good," Dr. Chen continued, printing images with the kind of discretion that suggested she'd learned when to ask questions and when to just do her job. "I'll want to see you weekly, given the circumstances. Prenatal vitamins, plenty of rest, avoid stress as much as possible." "Avoid stress," Lena laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. "I'm living in a fortress, hiding from mob families who want to kill me, while the FBI tries to turn me into an informant. How exactly do I avoid stress?" "By focusing on what you can control." Dr. Chen's voice softened. "You can control what you eat, how much you sleep, whether you let fear consume you or channel it into preparation. The rest, the violence, the politics, the men making decisions around you, that's beyond your sphere of influence. Save your energy for what matters." It was the most practical advice Lena had received in days. After Dr. Chen left, Sophia brought lunch and news from the outside world. The diner shooting had made local news but been buried under other violence. 3 dead in an unrelated gang conflict, drug raid in the warehouse district, the normal rhythm of a city that had learned to digest tragedy without choking on it. Lena's name appeared nowhere. It was like she'd never existed. "Dominic's good at making problems disappear," Sophia said, setting down a tray of food clearly designed by someone who understood pregnancy nutrition. "Sometimes I think that's his greatest talent, not the violence or the business acumen, just the ability to reshape reality until it serves his purposes." Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be informative. You're living in his world now, whether temporary or permanent. Understanding how that world works is the difference between surviving and thriving. Sophia moved to the window, looking out over the fortress grounds. "I came to work for Dominic's father 20 years ago. Housekeeper, nothing more. I watched that man destroy everything he touched, his wife, his sons, his business partners. He saw people as assets to be used or threats to be eliminated. And Dominic is trying very hard not to become his father. Sometimes he succeeds, sometimes—" Sophia turned, eyes carrying the weight of witnessed history. "Sometimes the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, no matter how hard it tries to roll away. Your job, if you choose to stay, is to be the person who reminds him which version of himself he wants to be. Before Lena could respond, her phone buzzed. Agent Walsh, I'm outside the estate gates. We need to talk. 5 minutes. Come alone. Lena's hands went cold. Walsh is here, at the gates. Sophia was across the room in 3 strides, reading the message over Lena's shoulder. Don't respond. Dominic needs to know about this immediately. She's FBI. I can't just ignore. She's a federal agent using you as bait to catch a bigger fish. There's a difference between law enforcement and justice, Lena. Right now, Walsh wants your cooperation more than your safety. Dominic wants you alive. Choose accordingly. But even as Sophia reached for her own phone to alert Dominic, Lena found herself wondering, what if Walsh had new information about her parents? What if the FBI had uncovered something that would finally make sense of 3 years of grief and unanswered questions? Her phone buzzed again. Walsh, I have new evidence about your parents' murders, the kind Dominic won't want you to see. 5 minutes. I need to talk to her. Lena stood, surprising herself with the decision. Just 5 minutes. Let me hear what she has to say. Dominic will never allow it. Then don't tell him until I'm already there. She met Sophia's eyes. You said my job is to remind him which version of himself he wants to be. How can I do that if I'm just another person he controls? Let me make this choice. Let me prove I'm not a prisoner here. Sophia studied her for a long moment, calculation visible behind those knowing eyes. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. 5 minutes. I'll escort you to the gate and stay within sight the entire time. But if anything feels wrong, if Walsh makes any move to remove you from this property, I pull you back. Understood? Understood. They moved through the fortress like co-conspirators, Sophia leading Lena down hallways decorated with art that probably cost more than most houses. Past security checkpoints staffed by men who looked at them with recognition but didn't question their passage. The estate was a world unto itself, self-contained, self-sufficient, designed to withstand siege. The front gates loomed ahead, iron and technology blended into barriers that could probably stop a tank. Through them, Lena could see Agent Walsh standing beside an unmarked sedan, looking exactly like someone who'd spent her career learning patience. Sophia pressed a button on an intercom. Open the pedestrian gate. Miss Carter has a visitor. A pause. Then a male voice, uncertain. Mr. Russo didn't authorize any visitors. Mr. Russo doesn't authorize Ms. Carter's medical appointments either, but Dr. Chen was here this morning. Sophia's tone could have frozen flame. Open the gate, now! The lock clicked. The pedestrian gate, a smaller door set into the larger vehicle entrance, swung open just wide enough for Lena to slip through. She stepped onto the street outside the fortress, feeling immediately exposed, vulnerable in ways she'd forgotten during her short captivity. Walsh straightened, something like relief crossing her features. Lena, thank God. I was beginning to think he wouldn't let you out. I have 5 minutes. Lena stayed within arm's reach of the gate, conscious of Sophia's watchful presence just inside. You said you have new evidence about my parents. More than evidence. Proof. Walsh pulled a tablet from her car, pulling up files that made Lena's breath catch. Bank records showing large deposits into her father's account in the weeks before his death. Surveillance photos of her father meeting with known criminals. Phone records suggesting regular contact with Dominic's organization. What is this? Lena's voice came out strangled. Your father wasn't investigating Dominic's enemies, Lena. He was on Dominic's payroll. Walsh's voice carried something almost like pity. He was feeding information to Russo's organization about ongoing police investigations. When he tried to back out, when he threatened to expose the corruption, that's when they killed him. Made it look like an accident to avoid scrutiny. You're lying. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Her father had been stressed those last weeks, making strange calls at odd hours, meeting people he wouldn't discuss. I'm showing you what our forensic accountants found, what our investigators uncovered after 3 years of digging. Walsh stepped closer. Dominic has been lying to you from the beginning. That night at the club wasn't coincidence. He sought you out specifically, knowing who you were, planning to compromise you before you could discover the truth about your father's connection to his organization. No. The word came out weak. He said he's been hunting the real killers. He showed me files he manufactured to gain your trust. Lena, I know this is hard to hear. I know you want to believe he's some complicated anti-hero, but he's a criminal who killed your father, seduced you to cover his tracks, and is now holding you prisoner while he eliminates anyone who might expose the truth. Walsh held out a phone. Make one call. Tell me what you've seen inside that estate. Help us build a case that will finally put him away where he belongs. Lena stared at the offered phone, her world fragmenting into pieces that wouldn't fit together no matter how hard she tried. Everything Walsh said made terrible sense. Her father's stress, the convenient timing of Dominic's appearance in her life, the way he'd swept her away before she could ask too many questions. But then she thought about the way he'd covered her body during the shooting, the prenatal care from doctors to presidents, the way he'd talked about not knowing what came next, about wanting to give her whatever life she chose. I need to see the original documents, Lena heard herself say. Not just summaries on a tablet. Everything, authenticated, verified, independent of your investigation. Walsh's expression tightened. We don't have time for academic verification. The Antonov family is planning another move. Our intel suggests they'll try to breach Dominic's security within 48 hours. If you're still inside when that happens, then Dominic will protect me, like he did last night. Lena stepped back toward the gate. You say you want to help me, Agent Walsh, but all you've really done is ask me to betray the father of my child based on evidence I can't verify. That's not help. That's manipulation. It's the truth. Walsh's mask cracked, revealing frustration beneath. Your father was dirty, Dominic killed him for it, and you're going to end up dead or in prison as an accessory if you don't cooperate. That baby you're carrying? It'll grow up visiting you behind bars while Dominic continues building his empire. Is that what you want? I want proof. Lena's voice steadied, clarity cutting through confusion. Real proof, not convenient narratives. And until you can provide that, I'm exactly where I need to be. She turned back toward the gate, but Walsh's voice stopped her. He'll destroy you, Lena, just like he destroyed your parents. And when he's done, there won't be anything left to save. The gate closed between them with quiet finality. Sophia waited on the other side, approval visible in her slight nod. Well handled, the older woman said quietly. You're learning faster than I expected. But as they walked back toward the fortress, Lena's hand shook with the weight of impossible questions. Was Walsh lying to turn her into an informant? Or was Dominic lying to keep her compliant? How could she trust either of them when both had everything to gain from her belief? They found Dominic in his study, Alessandro with him, both men standing over a map of the city marked with pins and notations. They looked up as Lena entered, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. You spoke to Walsh. Not a question. Dominic's voice carried cold fury barely restrained. Against explicit orders. You don't get to give me orders. Lena met his glare without flinching. I'm not one of your employees. You're under my protection, which means following protocols that keep you alive. He crossed the room like a gathering storm. What did she tell you? That my father was on your payroll, that you killed him when he tried to back out, that everything you've told me is a lie designed to keep me compliant while you eliminate your enemies. The words came out steadier than she felt. She had bank records, surveillance photos, evidence. Alessandro swore in Italian. Dominic's jaw clenched so tight Lena heard his teeth grind. And you believed her, Dominic said flatly. I don't know what to believe. Lena's voice cracked despite her best efforts. You say one thing, she says another, and I'm caught in the middle trying to figure out who's using me more effectively. So I'm going to ask you directly, and I want the truth. Was my father working for you? The silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes. The word landed like a physical blow. Lena actually stepped backward, hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. But not the way Walsh made it sound, Dominic continued, voice tight with controlled emotion. Your father approached me 6 months before he died. Said he'd uncovered evidence that someone in his department was protecting the Antonovs' trafficking operation. He needed resources the police couldn't provide. Surveillance equipment, forensic analysis, protection for his family. I provided those resources because shutting down the Antonovs benefited both of us. The bank deposits were payments for legitimate consulting work on security systems for my legal businesses. All documented, all taxed, all completely above board. He moved to a safe built into the wall, pulling out files. Here, every contract, every invoice, every receipt. Your father wasn't dirty, Lena. He was desperate to stop monsters who'd corrupted the very system meant to stop them. And when they realized how close he was getting, they killed him. Lena took the files with shaking hands, scanning documents that did indeed show exactly what Dominic claimed. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. Walsh has been trying to flip people inside my organization for years. For all I knew, that night at the club was you fishing for information to give the FBI. His expression softened slightly. By the time I realized you were exactly who you appeared to be, someone grieving and lost and trying to find meaning in senseless violence, it felt too late to explain without seeming like I was manipulating you. Alessandro cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give you two privacy. Stay. Dominic didn't look away from Lena. She deserves to hear all of it, not just the parts I'm comfortable sharing. He turned to his brother. Tell her what we found last week, about the informant. Alessandro pulled up files on his laptop, turning the screen toward Lena. We've had someone inside Walsh's investigation for 6 months. She's not a bad agent. She genuinely believes you're in danger, genuinely thinks she's helping. But she's being fed information by someone who wants Dominic destroyed. Someone who's been manufacturing evidence to support a narrative. Someone in the Antonov organization, Dominic added. They've got people everywhere, police, prosecutors, federal agencies. This whole thing with Walsh approaching you, showing you convenient evidence, trying to turn you into an informant, it's designed to destroy my organization from the inside while they make their next move. Lena's head spun. So Walsh thinks she's helping me, but she's actually being manipulated by your enemies who want to use me against you. Exactly. And I'm supposed to just believe this because you say so? Trust that your investigation is more reliable than the FBI's? No. Dominic's voice gentled. You're supposed to look at the evidence from both sides and make your own decision. That's why I'm showing you everything instead of just demanding you trust me. That's why I'm not forbidding contact with Walsh, even though every instinct says I should lock you in this fortress and never let anyone near you. But, Lena heard the unspoken word, but I need you to understand that your choices affect more than just you now. That baby you're carrying, it makes you the most valuable target in this city. And every time you step outside these walls, every time you talk to Walsh or anyone else who might be compromised, you're gambling with 2 lives instead of 1. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see gray eyes that held exhaustion and determination in equal measure. So choose, Lena. Choose who you trust. Choose where you stand. But choose knowing that whatever happens next, I will do everything in my power to keep you and our child safe, even if that means protecting you from yourself. The baby fluttered inside her, tiny movements that felt like a question she couldn't answer. Outside the study windows, afternoon light painted the fortress grounds in gold and shadow. Somewhere beyond these walls, Agent Walsh was probably filing reports about an uncooperative witness. Somewhere in the city, the Antonov family was planning their next attack. And here, in this room built on secrets and survival, Lena stood at a crossroads with only impossible choices in every direction. I need time, she finally said. Time to process all of this. Time to figure out what I actually believe versus what I want to believe. You have until the Antonovs make their next move. Dominic returned to the map on his desk. According to our intel, that's less than 2 days. After that, everything changes. For all of us. The hours that followed felt like existing in 2 separate realities simultaneously. In one, Lena was a guest in a fortress, free to move through elegant rooms and manicured gardens, while Sophia brought meals and made polite conversation about everything except the armed guards patrolling the perimeter. In the other, she was a prisoner counting down to an attack she couldn't prevent, carrying a child that had made her the epicenter of a war she barely understood. Night fell across the estate like a heavy curtain. Lena stood on her private terrace, watching lights come on across the city below. Ordinary people in ordinary homes living ordinary lives that suddenly seemed impossibly precious. Somewhere out there, her roommate was probably studying for midterms. Her classmates were working shifts at the hospital, learning to save lives in controlled environments where the biggest threat was incompetence rather than calculated murder. She'd left that world 36 hours ago. It already felt like another lifetime. Can't sleep? Dominic's voice came from the shadows behind her, quiet enough not to startle, but present enough to announce his arrival. He'd changed from the business clothes he'd worn during their confrontation, now wearing dark jeans and a fitted black shirt that made him look younger, more approachable. More like the man she'd met in that club rather than the crime lord who commanded empires. Too much to process, Lena admitted without turning. Too many versions of the truth that don't quite fit together. Truth is usually messier than people want it to be. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, maintaining careful distance. People want clean narratives, good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. Reality doesn't work that way. Is that supposed to be comforting? The moral ambiguity defense? It's supposed to be honest. He pulled something from his pocket, setting it on the railing between them. Her father's police badge, the metal worn smooth from years of carrying. I found this in the evidence from your parents' car. The police never returned it to you because officially it was part of their investigation. Unofficially, someone in the department didn't want you asking questions about why your father was carrying it the night he died when he'd supposedly been off duty. Lena's hands trembled as she picked up the badge, running her fingers over the engraved numbers she'd memorized as a child. How long have you had this? 2 years. I've been meaning to return it, but every time I thought about making contact, something stopped me. Guilt, maybe. Or fear that giving it to you would open wounds that had finally started to heal. His voice carried unexpected vulnerability. I know what Walsh told you makes sense. I know how the evidence looks from the outside. But your father was a good man trying to do the right thing in a system that had been corrupted from the inside. He came to me because I was the only person with enough resources and motivation to help him take down the Antonovs. And when they discovered what he was doing, they killed him. Lena's voice broke. They murdered him and my mother and made it look like an accident. And I've spent 3 years thinking it was random, thinking I could have prevented it if I'd just convinced them to take a different route home that night. You couldn't have prevented it. They'd been planning the hit for weeks. If not the bridge, then somewhere else. If not that night, then another. Dominic turned to face her fully. I know that doesn't help. I know it doesn't change what you lost. But I need you to understand that everything I've done since then, every resource I've devoted to hunting the Antonovs, every risk I've taken to expose their operation, has been about making sure your parents' deaths meant something, about finishing what your father started. The badge felt heavy in her palm, solid and real in ways nothing else had since this nightmare began. Agent Walsh said you killed him, that you're the monster I should be running from. Walsh believes what she's been told by people who want her to believe it. She's a good agent working with bad information, which makes her dangerous in ways actual corrupt agents aren't. Because she genuinely thinks she's saving you from me. He paused, jaw tightening. The truth is more complicated than either narrative allows. Yes, I run an organization that operates outside the law. Yes, I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. But I didn't kill your father, and I didn't seduce you as part of some elaborate manipulation. What happened between us that night, that was real. Maybe the only real thing in my life for longer than I care to admit. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately that the desire itself felt like weakness. How do I know you're not just telling me what I need to hear? How do I trust anything when everyone has something to gain from my cooperation? You don't. You can't. Dominic's honesty was almost brutal. Trust is earned through actions, not words. So watch me, Lena. Watch how I handle what's coming. Watch whether I prioritize your safety or my business. Watch whether I try to control you or give you the information you need to make your own choices. He gestured toward the city below. In less than 48 hours, the Antonovs are going to make their move. They've been planning something for months, and our intel suggests it's going to be significant. When it happens, you'll see exactly who I am. And then you can decide whether you want to stay or spend the rest of your life running from ghosts. Before Lena could respond, Alessandro appeared in the terrace doorway, his expression grim. We have a problem. The perimeter sensors just picked up movement in the North Woods. 3 individuals, professional-grade equipment, approaching the estate. Dominic's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. the vulnerable man disappearing behind the cold strategist. How far out? Half a mile in closing. They're good. Disabling cameras as they advance, avoiding obvious approaches. If we hadn't upgraded the sensor grid last month, we'd never have detected them. Evacuation protocol, now. Dominic turned to Lena. We're moving you to the safe room. No arguments, no delays. What's happening? Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Is it them, the Antonovs? Unknown. Could be reconnaissance, could be an actual assault. Either way, you're not staying exposed. He gripped her arm, not roughly, but with unmistakable authority. Alessandro, get Sofia. I want Lena in the bunker with full security detail within 3 minutes. They moved through the fortress at a pace just short of running, Dominic's hand on Lena's lower back, guiding her through hallways she'd never seen before. The elegant facade of the main house gave way to something more utilitarian. Reinforced doors, biometric locks, lighting that shifted from warm amber to harsh white. This was the fortress's true heart, designed not for comfort, but survival. The safe room turned out to be more like a luxury apartment buried underground, complete with bedroom, bathroom, and enough supplies to survive a siege. Sofia was already there, calm as ever, despite the emergency, directing 2 security personnel to check systems and verify backup power. Inside, Dominic ordered, practically pushing Lena through the door. Stay here until I come for you personally. No one else, no matter what they say. You're leaving? Panic edged into Lena's voice before she could stop it. What if they get past your security? What if they won't? Absolute certainty. I've spent 5 years making this place impenetrable, but I need to coordinate the response, and I can't do that if I'm worried about you being exposed. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. Trust me, Lena, just for tonight. Trust that I know how to protect what's mine. Then he was gone, the reinforced door sealing behind him with a hydraulic hiss that sounded horrifyingly final. Lena stood frozen in the center of the safe room while Sofia moved with practiced efficiency, checking supplies and communication systems. How often does this happen? Lena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The alarms, the lockdowns, the moving to secret bunkers? More often than Dominic would like, less often than his enemies hope. Sofia pulled out a tablet, bringing up security feeds that showed multiple angles of the estate grounds. But this is the first time they've gotten this close since the perimeter was upgraded, which means either they've gotten better or someone gave them inside information. The implications hit Lena like cold water. A mole. Someone inside Dominic's organization working for the Antonovs. Possibly. Or someone who thinks they're working for the FBI and doesn't realize they're actually feeding information to the enemy. Sofia's pointed look made the accusation clear. Agent Walsh has been very interested in the estate's security measures, asking questions about protocols, guard rotations, weak points in the defense grid. You think I told her something during our 5-minute conversation at the gate? Lena's voice rose despite the confined space. I barely said anything except demanding proof of her accusations. I think Walsh is a skilled interrogator who knows how to extract information from people who don't even realize they're giving it. A comment about which wing of the house you're staying in, which staff members you've met, where security seems heaviest, all useful intelligence to someone planning an assault. Sofia's expression softened slightly. I'm not accusing you of deliberately betraying us. I'm saying you may have inadvertently provided pieces of a puzzle Walsh is putting together for purposes that aren't nearly as noble as she claims. Guilt twisted in Lena's stomach. Had she said something during that conversation? Mentioned Sofia's name or Dr. Chen's visit or the layout of the guest wing? She'd been so focused on the emotional confrontation, on Walsh's accusations about her father, that she hadn't been guarding her words. On the security monitors, Lena watched Dominic appear in what looked like a command center, surrounded by screens and personnel who moved with military precision. His brother stood at his right hand, both of them studying displays that tracked the approaching intruders with disturbing accuracy. North perimeter, holding position, a voice crackled through speakers. 3 confirmed hostiles, armed but not advancing. They're watching us. Reconnaissance, Alessandro said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. They're testing response times, mapping security protocols. Or they're a distraction, Dominic's voice carried cold analysis. Pull up thermal imaging on the south and east approaches. If I were planning an assault, I'd use a visible team to draw attention while the real threat comes from an unexpected angle. The screens shifted, showing different sections of the estate. For several minutes, nothing. Then Alessandro swore viciously in Italian as thermal signatures appeared on the eastern perimeter. Not 3 people, but 7, moving with coordinated precision toward a section of wall that the previous sensors had left partially blind. They knew, Dominic said flatly. They knew about the sensor upgrade and exactly where we still had gaps in coverage. Someone gave them detailed intelligence, possibly within the last 24 hours. His eyes found the camera that fed to the safe room, looking directly at Lena through the screen. The accusation in his gaze made her blood run cold. "I didn't," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "I swear I didn't tell Walsh anything useful." But watching the assault unfold on the monitors, seeing how precisely the attackers targeted the estate's few remaining vulnerabilities, Lena felt doubt creep in. What had she said during that conversation? What details had she let slip while defending herself against Walsh's accusations? On the screens, Dominic's security team moved to intercept the eastern approach with the kind of coordination that suggested extensive training. The 3-person team on the north perimeter suddenly retreated, melting back into the woods as their distraction mission succeeded. The 7 on the east pressed forward, using equipment that looked military-grade to breach the wall. "They're coming in hard," one of Dominic's men reported. "Request permission to engage with lethal force." Lena held her breath, waiting for Dominic to give the order that would turn his estate into a war zone. But instead, he said something that surprised her. "Non-lethal only unless absolutely necessary. I want them alive. I want to know who sent them and what intelligence they were working from." "Sir, at this level of threat," I gave an order, ice in his voice. "Follow it." The assault team hit the breach point in a coordinated rush, moving with the kind of speed that suggested serious training. But Dominic's security was ready, deploying what looked like non-lethal countermeasures, flashbangs, smoke, concussion grenades that disabled rather than killed. The fight was over in less than 2 minutes, all 7 attackers down and being secured by personnel who moved with practiced efficiency. "Sweep them for cyanide capsules," Dominic ordered. "I don't want any convenient suicides before we get answers. And get me visual confirmation on the North team's withdrawal. I want to know if they're actually gone or just waiting for another opportunity." Lena watched him orchestrate the response with cold precision, simultaneously tracking multiple threats while ensuring minimal casualties on both sides. This was the man Walsh warned her about, capable of violence, commanding it with casual authority. But he was also the man who'd ordered non-lethal force when he could have simply eliminated the threat permanently. Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expression darkening. "Dominic wants you upstairs. The immediate threat is contained, but he has questions that can't wait." The safe room door unsealed, and 2 security personnel Lena didn't recognize escorted her back through the fortress to Dominic's study. The elegant rooms she'd walked through earlier now felt different, transformed by the knowledge of what lay beneath: bunkers and weapons and systems designed for siege warfare. Beautiful camouflage over brutal reality. Dominic stood at his desk when she entered, still radiating the cold focus of someone managing a crisis. Blood spattered his shirt cuff. Not his, she noted with relief, and his knuckles showed the raw marks of recent violence. Alessandro stood near the window, face grim, while 3 of the captured attackers knelt on the floor with zip ties securing their hands behind their backs. "Lena," Dominic's voice carried no warmth. "I need you to tell me exactly what you discussed with Agent Walsh. Every word, every detail you might have mentioned about this estate." "I told you we barely talked about—" These men knew about our sensor upgrade that happened 48 hours ago. They knew about the gap in eastern coverage that existed for exactly 12 hours before we sealed it. They knew which approach would give them the best chance of breaching the perimeter undetected. His eyes bored into her. "That's not information you get from distant surveillance. That's intelligence from someone who's been inside recently, someone who had access to current security protocols." The implication landed like a physical blow. "You think I told Walsh and Walsh told them? That I'm responsible for this attack? I think you had a conversation with a federal agent who's either compromised or being used by people who want me dead. I think details you considered innocuous might have been exactly what they needed to plan this assault. And I think, he stopped, jaw clenching. I think I need to know whether I can trust you or whether keeping you here is going to get everyone I care about killed. One of the attackers laughed, the sound harsh in the tense silence. You want to know about trust, Russo? Ask her what else Walsh told her. Ask her about the deal. Dominic's attention swung to the man like a weapon finding its target. What deal? The one where she wears a wire, gathers evidence for 6 months, and gets full immunity plus witness protection for her and the baby. Walsh has been working on her for weeks, just waiting for the right pressure to make her crack. The attacker's smile was vicious. We weren't here to kill you tonight. We were here to make sure she understands what happens to people who don't cooperate. Nothing motivates quite like fear for your child. Lena's vision tunneled. The room spun. Somewhere distant, she heard Dominic demanding answers, heard Alessandro swearing, heard Sophia's calm voice cutting through the chaos. But all she could process was the terrible truth. This attack wasn't about killing Dominic. It was about terrorizing her into becoming an informant. Is it true? Dominic's voice cut through her shock. Did Walsh offer you a deal? Yes. The word came out barely audible. During our first meeting at the coffee shop, she said if I cooperated, gathered evidence, they'd give me immunity and protection. I said no. I told her I needed proof before I'd even consider it. And the second meeting? At my gates? She showed me evidence about my father, bank records, surveillance photos, said he was on your payroll, that you killed him when he became a liability. Lena forced herself to meet Dominic's eyes. I didn't tell her anything about the estate's security. I asked for better proof of her accusations and left. That's all. The attacker laughed again. Doesn't matter what you told her directly. Walsh has been monitoring you since the first contact, tracking your phone, analyzing your movements, building a profile. Every call you make, every text you send, every website you visit. She knows which wing of the house you're in based on wireless network connections, knows your schedule based on when Dr. Chen visited, knows... Dominic moved so fast Lena barely saw it, hauling the man up by his collar and slamming him against the wall hard enough to rattle paintings. Who do you work for? The Antonovs or someone else using their resources? Does it matter? Blood trickled from the attacker's split lip. You're finished, Russo. The FBI has everything they need to bring RICO charges. Walsh was just buying time, keeping you distracted while they built the case. This whole thing with the girl was always just about pressure. Make you protective enough to slip up, expose enough of your operation to give them leverage. Alessandro spoke quietly from his position by the window. He's telling the truth, or at least what he believes is the truth, which means we need to assume the Antonovs have been coordinating with someone in Walsh's investigation, feeding her information, shaping her narrative, using her crusade against you to serve their own purposes. Dominic released the attacker, letting him slump to the floor. When he turned to Lena, his expression carried something she'd never seen before: doubt. Your phone, where is it? In my room. I left it charging when the alarm went off. Alessandro, get it. I want our tech team to analyze every transmission, every data point, everything that device has been sending since Lena arrived here. He crossed to the bar, pouring amber liquid that this time definitely wasn't non-alcoholic. And get these people out of my sight before I forget why I wanted them alive. Security personnel moved to remove the attackers, hauling them toward whatever holding area the fortress maintained for captured enemies. The one who'd been taunting them managed one final comment as he was dragged out. She's already betrayed you, Russo. Even if she doesn't know it yet, Walsh owns her, and through her, she'll own you. The door closed, leaving Lena alone with Dominic and the wreckage of whatever fragile trust they'd been building. He stood at the window, back to her, shoulders rigid with barely controlled tension. I didn't knowingly tell her anything, Lena said into the silence. I swear I didn't deliberately compromise your security. But you did compromise it. Whether knowingly or not, you gave Walsh opportunities to gather intelligence that got used to plan an assault on my home. He turned, and the pain in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. I want to believe you. I want to trust that what's between us is real, that you're not just another person playing angles. But everything about this situation screams trap, and I've survived this long by trusting my instincts over my desires. So what are you saying? That I'm a prisoner now? That you can't trust me enough to let me make my own choices? I'm saying that I have a decision to make, and it's the hardest one I've faced in a decade. Dominic moved closer, stopping just short of touching distance. I can keep you here, locked down until I've eliminated the Antonov threat and exposed whoever's corrupting Walsh's investigation. Safe, protected, and completely trapped. Or I can trust you, really trust you, with information that could destroy everything I've built. Give you a choice about who you want to be in this war instead of just assuming you'll choose me because biology says we're connected. Lena's breath caught. What kind of information? The kind that Agent Walsh would kill to have. The kind that proves your father was working with me to stop the Antonovs, complete with documented evidence of their trafficking operation, their connections to corrupt officials, everything we've gathered over 3 years. He pulled a flash drive from his desk drawer, holding it like the dangerous weapon it was. This drive contains enough information to bring down the Antonov family, expose the officials they've bought, and vindicate your father's name. It also contains details about my organization that the FBI could use to destroy me. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm tired of secrets, tired of manipulation, and half-truths in relationships built on strategic advantage rather than actual trust. Dominic set the drive on the desk between them. I'm going to tell you everything, Lena. Not just the parts that make me look good or justify my actions. Everything. My father's empire, how I transformed it, the lines I've crossed, and the ones I won't. The violence, the moral compromises, all of it. And then you're going to decide who you believe, me or Walsh. The man who's been hunting your parents' killers or the agent who's been played by those same killers to destroy their enemy. Alessandro returned with Lena's phone, handing it to Dominic without comment. Tech team is standing by for analysis. Good. Start with any tracking software or data transmission we didn't authorize. I want to know exactly what Walsh has been collecting. Dominic turned back to Lena. Sit. This is going to take a while. For the next 3 hours, Dominic laid bare the architecture of his empire with brutal honesty. He showed her how his father's street-level drug operation had been transformed into a network of legitimate businesses, shipping companies, real estate holdings, investment firms that still served the same ultimate purpose, moving money and goods outside legal scrutiny. He explained the protection rackets that funded community programs, the gambling operations that employed hundreds, the gray areas where crime and commerce blended into something neither purely legal nor entirely criminal. My father believed in ruling through fear, Dominic said, pulling up files that showed the old regime's brutality. He killed competitors, terrorized neighborhoods, built an empire on the backs of people too scared to resist. When I took over at 22, everyone expected more of the same. Instead, I started divesting from the most violent operations. No more street drugs, no more prostitution, no more targeting civilians. I focused on what I call victimless crimes, tax evasion, money laundering for other wealthy criminals, gambling, smuggling luxury goods. Not legal, but not destroying communities either. That's still illegal, Lena pointed out. Still crime. Yes, but it's crime with boundaries. Crime that doesn't leave bodies in the street or children orphaned by violence. He pulled up another file, this one showing the community center his organization had built in the neighborhood where Lena grew up. I'm not asking you to think I'm a good person. I'm asking you to understand that the world isn't divided neatly into heroes and villains. Some of us are trying to be less evil than we could be, and that has to count for something. He showed her the investigation into the Antonov family, years of accumulated evidence detailing trafficking operations that moved women and children like commodities, murder for hire services, the kind of predatory violence that made Dominic's criminal enterprise look almost civilized by comparison. Lena's father appeared throughout the files, his police reports and personal notes contributing to a case that was 90% complete when he died. He was going to expose them through official channels, Dominic explained. He had enough evidence to bring RICO charges, shut down their operation, send the leadership to prison for life. But he needed protection for you and your mother first, security that the police couldn't provide. That's why he came to me. Not because he was corrupt, but because he knew I had the resources to keep his family safe while he finished building the case. And then they killed him anyway. Lena's voice cracked. And then they corrupted the investigation, buried the evidence, and made sure anyone who looked too closely at the case met convenient accidents or decided to back off. Dominic pulled up final files showing the systematic destruction of her father's work. Walsh wasn't involved in the original investigation. She came in 3 years later, assigned to investigate me based on intelligence provided by sources she believed were credible. She doesn't know those sources are Antonov plants, doesn't realize she's been weaponized against the person actually trying to stop them. The documentation was overwhelming. Bank records, surveillance footage, witness testimonies, forensic evidence all pointing to a conspiracy that ran deeper than Lena had imagined possible. Her father hadn't just been investigating a criminal organization, he'd been uncovering corruption that reached into police departments, prosecutors' offices, federal agencies. "This is why Walsh can't help you," Dominic said quietly. "Her investigation is compromised from the top down. The moment you give her any of this evidence, it'll be buried or destroyed by the same people who've been protecting the Antonovs for years. The only way to actually stop them is to work outside the system they've corrupted, which means working with you." Lena finished the thought. "Trusting that your illegal methods will somehow achieve justice that the legal system can't." Yes. Alessandro had been silent throughout the presentation, but now he spoke up. "We have a plan. In 3 days, we're submitting all of this evidence to federal prosecutors we've vetted. People outside Walsh's chain of command, people the Antonovs haven't bought. Simultaneously, we're executing financial maneuvers that will freeze their assets, expose their money laundering operations, and make it impossible for them to flee or destroy evidence. Legal destruction, no violence required." "And if they fight back?" Lena asked. "If they try to kill you before you can execute this plan?" "Then we defend ourselves with prejudice," Dominic said flatly. "I'm giving them a chance to face justice through legitimate channels. But if they choose violence, I'll respond in kind. That's the difference between me and my father. I prefer legal solutions when possible, but I'm not stupid enough to be defenseless." Lena's head spun with information overload. Everything Dominic had shown her made sense in ways Walsh's accusations hadn't. The evidence was too detailed, too consistent, too supported by independent verification. Either he was the most elaborate liar she'd ever met, or he was telling the truth about at least the broad strokes of his involvement with her father. "I need to see something," she heard herself say. "The flash drive, the one with everything on it. I need to verify this myself, not just take your word for it." Dominic handed it over without hesitation. "There's a computer in your room set up for secure access. No internet connection, no way for the data to be transmitted outside this building. Take all the time you need, read everything, verify what you can, then decide whether you trust me enough to help finish what your father started." "And if I decide I don't? If I think you're still manipulating me?" His smile was sad. "Then I'll arrange transportation to wherever you want to go, provide enough money to support you and the baby, and accept that I lost the only thing I've actually cared about in years. But I won't force you to stay, Lena. Whatever else I am, I'm not a man who keeps women prisoner against their will." Alessandro cleared his throat. "The tech analysis came back on your phone. Walsh installed sophisticated tracking software during your first meeting, probably when you were distracted by the evidence she was showing you. It's been transmitting your location data, wireless network information, even ambient audio when activated. She's had real-time intelligence on everything happening in this estate since you arrived." The betrayal hit Lena like a physical blow. Walsh had been using her as an unwitting spy, collecting information while pretending to offer help. Every conversation Lena had overheard, every security measure she'd observed, every detail about the estate's layout, all transmitted to someone who claimed to be helping her but was actually building a case against the father of her child. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know she'd planted tracking software." "I believe you." Dominic's voice was gentle. "Walsh is a professional. She's been doing this for years. You never stood a chance against that level of manipulation." He held out his hand. "Give me the phone. We'll feed her false information for the next 72 hours while we execute the plan. Make her think you're cooperating, that you're gathering evidence against me. By the time she realizes what's actually happening, the Antonovs will be in federal custody, and her investigation will be exposed as fundamentally compromised." Lena handed over the phone, feeling like she was severing the last connection to her old life. What happens to Walsh when all of this comes out? If she's actually being manipulated rather than actively corrupt, her career takes a hit, but she survives. The FBI doesn't like admitting their agents got played, but they like prosecuting dirty agents even less. Alessandro pulled up files on his laptop. We've been documenting every interaction between Walsh and her supposed informants. Once we expose the Antonov connection, she'll either become an asset in the larger case or be quietly reassigned to somewhere that doesn't involve organized crime. And if she's actually working with them, knowingly helping the people who killed my parents, then she goes down with the rest of them. Dominic's voice carried cold promise. I don't care if she's FBI or the Pope himself. Anyone who helped murder your family will face consequences. That's not negotiable. The flash drive felt heavy in Lena's hand, weighted with the power to destroy or vindicate, depending on what she chose to do with the information. She looked at Dominic, really looked at him, trying to see past the crime lord facade to the man underneath. What she saw was complicated, morally ambiguous, capable of both protection and violence, but also honest in ways Walsh had never been, transparent about his flaws rather than hiding behind institutional authority. I need time, she said finally. Time to go through all of this, verify what I can, think about what it means for me and the baby. Can you give me that? 24 hours without pressure, without demands, just space to process? Take 48 if you need it. Dominic moved toward the door. But Lena, whatever you decide, I meant what I said earlier. You're not a prisoner here. If you want to leave, if you decide you can't trust me, I'll help you disappear so thoroughly that neither Walsh nor the Antonovs will ever find you. That's a promise. He left her alone in the study with a flash drive full of evidence and a choice that would determine not just her future, but the future of the life growing inside her. Through the windows, dawn was beginning to break across the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossibly beautiful given the darkness of everything else. Lena sat down at the computer, inserted the flash drive, and began to read. Hour after hour, file after file, she pieced together the truth about her father's last months. She saw his notes detailing the trafficking operation, his careful documentation of connections between the Antonovs and corrupt officials, his growing fear as he realized how deep the corruption ran. She saw his final report, dated 2 days before his death, outlining plans to submit evidence to federal prosecutors he believed he could trust. And she saw the aftermath, the systematic destruction of his work, the burial of evidence, the reclassification of his murder as accidental death. She saw Walsh's investigation begin 3 years later, built on intelligence provided by sources whose connections to the Antonov family were documented in files Walsh apparently never saw. She saw how completely the system her father had trusted had failed him. By the time Lena finished reading, morning had given way to afternoon. Sophia appeared with food that went mostly untouched, water that Lena forced herself to drink for the baby's sake. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. Dominic had been telling the truth. Not all of it, not without self-serving omissions, but the essential core of his story aligned with independent verification in ways Walsh's accusations never had. Her father had been a hero, not a corrupt cop. Dominic had been an ally, not a murderer, and Walsh, whatever her intentions, had been weaponized by the very people who'd destroyed Lena's family. The question now was what to do about it. Help Dominic finish her father's work and risk becoming complicit in illegal activity? Trust the legal system despite overwhelming evidence of its corruption? Or run, disappear, raise this baby in hiding and hope the war between powerful men never found them? Lena's hand moved to her stomach, feeling the life that had complicated everything. This child deserved better than a mother paralyzed by fear, deserved better than a future built on running and hiding. Deserved, maybe, to grow up knowing its father had chosen justice over easy vengeance, had tried to be better than the empire he'd inherited. She found Dominic in his study, reviewing security footage from the attack with the kind of focused intensity that suggested he'd been working without sleep. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression suggested he'd been waiting for this moment with the same anxiety she felt. I read everything, Lena said without preamble. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence. And I believe you. About my father, about the Antonovs, about Walsh being manipulated. I believe you. Relief flooded his features before he could hide it. Thank you. But I need you to understand something. She moved closer, holding his gaze. I'm not agreeing to help you because I trust you completely or because I think you're some misunderstood hero. I'm doing this because my father died trying to stop monsters, and I won't let his death be meaningless. I'm doing this for him, for my mother, for every person the Antonovs have hurt. And yes, for this baby who deserves better than a world where people like them operate with impunity. I'll take whatever motivation gets you on my side. Dominic stood, towering over her, but somehow less threatening than he'd been. What do you need from me? The truth. All of it, even the parts that make you look bad. No more strategic omissions, no more half-truths designed to manipulate my perception. If we're doing this, we're doing it as partners who trust each other enough to be honest about our flaws. She paused. And I need to know what happens after. After the Antonovs are destroyed. After Walsh's investigation collapses. After your 3-day plan succeeds or fails. What happens to us? To this baby. To whatever this is between us. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, conflict visible in his expression. Then, I don't know. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making plans without knowing the ending. What I do know is that I want you in my life. Want our child to know both parents. Want to find out if what we felt that night was real or just chemistry and timing. His hand rose to cup her face, the gesture now familiar. But I also know I can't promise you normalcy. Can't promise that my enemies won't always be a threat, that my past won't haunt our future. The best I can offer is honesty, protection, and the promise that I'll never stop trying to be worthy of whatever trust you give me. It wasn't the declaration of love that some part of Lena had been hoping for, but it was honest, unvarnished by romantic illusion, grounded in the reality of who they both were. And somehow, that meant more than empty promises of happily ever after. Then let's finish what my father started, Lena said. Show me the plan, all of it. And let me help you make sure the people who killed my parents face justice. Real justice. Not convenient accidents or mysterious suicides. I want them to face everything they've done. Dominic's smile was fierce, approving. Then welcome to the war, Lena Carter. Fair warning, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Good, she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. I'm tired of being a victim. Time to be something else. The war room existed in a part of the fortress Lena had never seen. A level below the safe room, accessed through biometric locks that recognized only Dominic, Alessandro, and 2 other trusted lieutenants. The space resembled something between a corporate boardroom and a military command center. Walls lined with screens displaying real-time data feeds, financial markets, and surveillance footage from locations across the city. Alessandro was already there when they arrived, along with 2 others Dominic introduced as Marcus Chen, his financial strategist, and Victoria Kovac, a former federal prosecutor who now handled what Dominic called legal warfare. Both studied Lena with the kind of professional assessment that suggested they'd been briefed on exactly how much of a wild card she represented. Everyone, this is Lena Carter, Dominic said, his hand settling on her lower back with casual possessiveness. She's read the files, verified the evidence, and decided to help us finish what her father started. She's also carrying my child, which makes her safety non-negotiable. Any plan we develop accounts for that reality first. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You're bringing a civilian into active operations? That's a significant departure from protocol. Protocol assumed I'd never care enough about anyone to compromise operational security. Dominic pulled out a chair for Lena, the gesture almost courtly despite the surroundings. Assumptions change. Lena stays in the loop, contributes to strategy, and has veto power over anything that puts her or the baby at unacceptable risk. Alessandro looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dominic's expression stopped him. Instead, he pulled up files on the main screen, displaying organizational charts that showed the Antonov family's structure like a corporate flowchart of crime. Current status, Alessandro began, falling into what was clearly a familiar briefing rhythm. The Antonov operation consists of 3 primary revenue streams: human trafficking, which nets them approximately $30 million annually, contract killings averaging $2 million per job, and money laundering services for international cartels worth another $50 million. Leadership is concentrated in 4 individuals. Photos appeared. Hard-faced men and one woman who looked like she could kill with her smile. Dmitry Antonov, the patriarch, his sons Victor and Alexei, and Irina Volkov, who runs their trafficking operation and happens to be Dmitry's sister. Lena studied the faces of the people who'd murdered her parents, committing them to memory. Dmitri looked exactly like what he was, an aging predator trying to maintain control through fear. Victor had the kind of brutal handsomeness that probably made him dangerous in multiple ways. Alexei seemed younger, less hardened, possibly the weak link. But it was Irina who made Lena's skin crawl. Elegant, refined, wearing a designer suit in her photo while running an operation that destroyed women's lives. They've been trying to expand into Dominic's territory for 5 years, Marcus picked up the briefing, initially through intimidation and targeted violence, but in the last 3 years they've gotten smarter, bribing officials, planting informants, using the legal system as a weapon. Your father's investigation threatened to expose their entire network, which is why they eliminated him. Since then, they've grown more entrenched, more confident. Until now, Victoria added, pulling up different files. These showing legal documents, financial records, things Lena's nursing training hadn't prepared her to fully understand. We've spent 2 years building a case that doesn't require criminal prosecution. Instead, we're hitting them through civil law, financial regulations, and international agreements. Freezing assets, exposing money laundering to regulatory agencies, triggering investigations by entities they can't bribe or threaten. Dominic moved to the screen, highlighting specific elements. The plan is 3-pronged and executes simultaneously 72 hours from now. First, Marcus triggers financial mechanisms that freeze their offshore accounts. Approximately $200 million becomes inaccessible overnight. Second, Victoria files civil RICO suits on behalf of trafficking victims, which opens their business records to discovery and public scrutiny. Third, Alessandro delivers complete evidence packages to federal prosecutors in 3 different jurisdictions, including the Southern District of New York, which the Antonovs haven't managed to corrupt. You're strangling them legally, Lena said slowly, understanding dawning, making it impossible for them to operate, pay their people, or hide their crimes, all without firing a shot. Exactly. Dominic's approval was evident. My father would have started a war, killed everyone connected to them, and created a power vacuum that would have destabilized half the city. This way, we use their own tactics against them, make them toxic to every legitimate institution they've infiltrated, force them to face justice through systems they've spent decades trying to corrupt. Alessandro zoomed in on specific individuals within the organization. The key is hitting them before they realize what's happening. If we give them warning, they'll move assets, destroy evidence, kill witnesses. Speed and coordination are everything, which is why, he paused, glancing at Dominic, which is why we need to address the Agent Walsh situation. She's still running surveillance through Lena's phone, still building what she thinks is a case against you. If she gets wind of our operation and tries to interfere, she could compromise everything. I have a solution for that, Lena said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. All eyes turned to her. Walsh thinks I'm cooperating with her investigation, feeding her information about Dominic's organization. What if I actually do that? Give her evidence. Real evidence, but frame it so she thinks it's about Dominic when it's actually about the Antonovs. Victoria leaned forward, interest sharpening her features. You want to use Walsh's own investigation against the people manipulating it. Feed her documented proof of criminal activity that happens to implicate the Antonovs' corruption instead of Dominic's operations. Exactly. My father's files show connections between the Antonovs and several officials Walsh has been working with. If I give her that information as part of what she thinks is me betraying Dominic, she'll investigate those connections. And when she does, she'll discover she's been played from the beginning. Lena pulled out her phone, the one Dominic's tech team had neutralized Walsh's tracking software on, replacing it with false data feeds. She trusts me, or at least she wants to. If I reach out, tell her I'm ready to cooperate, she'll believe it's her pressure tactics working. Dominic studied her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. You understand what you're proposing. Walsh will ask you to wear a wire, record conversations, possibly testify in federal court. Even if we're feeding her false information, you'll be putting yourself in a position where the FBI expects results. Then we give her results. Just not the ones she's expecting. Lena met his gaze without flinching. My father died trying to expose these people. If I can use Walsh's investigation to finish his work while simultaneously protecting you, that's not manipulation. That's justice with strategy. Alessandro grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. I like her. She thinks like we do. That's what I'm afraid of, Dominic muttered, but his tone carried reluctant admiration. Marcus, Victoria, could this work? Could we use a federal investigation as a delivery mechanism for evidence without compromising our primary operation? The two consulted quietly, pulling up files and running scenarios on tablets. Finally, Victoria nodded. It's risky, but viable. Walsh has jurisdictional authority to investigate corruption within law enforcement. If Lena provides evidence of officials taking Antonov money, Walsh will have to follow up regardless of her original intentions. The key is timing. We feed her the information 24 hours before we execute the primary plan. Gives her enough time to verify what she's seen, but not enough time to interfere with our financial and legal attacks. And if she suspects she's being manipulated, Lena asked, then she's a better agent than our assessment suggests, and we adapt. Dominic moved to stand beside Lena's chair, his presence both protective and possessive. But I don't send you into a meeting with Walsh alone. If we're doing this, I want surveillance, backup, and extraction protocols in place. You wear our wire, not hers. You maintain control of the narrative. She'll search me for wires. She's too professional not to. Not if the meeting happens somewhere she considers secure, somewhere she thinks gives her the advantage. Alessandro was already pulling up locations on the screen. Her office would be ideal. Federal building, metal detectors, full security. She'll assume you can't be wired in that environment, which is exactly why our tech team can get equipment past their outdated scanners. The plan took shape over the next several hours, refined through debate and contingency planning that reminded Lena of surgery rotations where every possible complication had to be anticipated. She would contact Walsh, claim she was ready to cooperate in exchange for guaranteed protection. The meeting would happen at Walsh's FBI office in 36 hours, enough time for Dominic's team to prepare, but not so much that Walsh could set up elaborate countermeasures. During the meeting, Lena would provide carefully curated evidence from her father's files, documents showing corrupt officials taking Antonov money, surveillance photos proving connections Walsh's own investigation had missed, enough genuine intelligence to make Walsh believe she'd finally turned her target. But the evidence would be framed to lead Walsh toward the Antonov corruption, rather than anything that could actually harm Dominic's organization. What about the Antonovs themselves? Lena asked as the briefing stretched past midnight. When all of this comes down, when they realize what's happening, won't they come after me? After us? They'll try, Dominic said flatly, which is why the third prong of the operation involves relocating you to a secure location outside the city the moment your meeting with Walsh concludes. Private airfield, chartered plane to a property I own in Montana that's never been connected to my name. You'll be there with full security detail until the Antonovs are in federal custody. And you? Where will you be while I'm hiding in Montana? Here, managing the operation, ensuring every element executes properly, protecting my organization from blowback. He must have seen something in her expression because his voice softened. I can't run, Lena. This is my city, my operation, my responsibility. But I can make sure you and our child are somewhere they can never reach you. So we separate. Right when things get most dangerous. The thought made her chest tight in ways that had nothing to do with fear. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. Long enough for the initial arrest to happen, for the Antonov organization to collapse, for the immediate threat to be neutralized. Dominic's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I know it's not ideal. I know asking you to trust me enough to hide while I face this alone is asking a lot, but I need to know you're safe. Need to know that whatever happens here, our child will survive. The unspoken implication hung heavy, that Dominic himself might not survive, that the Antonovs might choose violence over surrender, that the legal warfare could turn into the actual kind. Lena wanted to argue, to demand she stay, to insist they face the danger together. But the baby fluttered inside her, a reminder that she was making decisions for 2 people now. Promise me something, she said quietly. Promise that if it comes down to choosing between destroying them and staying alive, you choose staying alive. I don't want to raise this baby alone because you decided revenge mattered more than survival. Dominic lifted her hand to his lips, the gesture unexpectedly tender. I promise I'll come back to you. Whatever it takes, whatever compromises I have to make. I'll survive this. We both will. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt like studying for the most important exam of her life, except failure meant death rather than a bad grade. Dominic's tech team fitted Lena with surveillance equipment so sophisticated it made spy movies look amateur. Audio transmitted through nearly invisible devices embedded in her clothing, video captured by a pendant that looked like ordinary jewelry, tracking that would let Dominic's people know her exact location within inches. Victoria drilled her on legal terminology, on how to frame information so Walsh would draw the intended conclusions, on maintaining composure under interrogation that would be friendly but no less intense for it. Alessandro taught her evasion techniques in case things went wrong, escape routes from the federal building, coded phrases to signal distress. Even Sophia contributed, helping Lena choose clothing that projected vulnerability while hiding the surveillance equipment. But it was the quiet moments with Dominic that stayed with her most clearly. Late-night conversations in his study where he shared details about his transformation of his father's empire, about the line between necessary evil and inexcusable violence, about what kind of father he wanted to be. Early morning walks through the estate grounds where armed guards pretended not to watch, while they discussed names for the baby, both avoiding the topic of what might happen if one of them didn't survive to use those names. I never wanted this for you, Dominic said during one of those walks, dawn painting the sky in watercolor shades. Never wanted to drag someone I care about into this world. My father used to say that caring was weakness, that successful men in our business stayed alone. I thought I'd proven him wrong by building something different than he did. But looking at you, knowing what I'm asking you to risk, maybe he was right. He wasn't. Lena stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Caring isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes any of this meaningful. You're not fighting the Antonovs to expand territory or increase profits. You're doing it because they killed my parents and because you know they'll keep killing unless someone stops them. That's not weakness. That's being human. Being human gets you killed in this business. Maybe. But being a monster gets you killed alone in a prison hospital, betrayed by everyone who ever worked for you. You told me that's how your father died. Do you really want to follow that path? She placed his hand on her stomach where the baby was becoming more active each day. Or do you want to build something different? Something worth surviving for? His answer came not in words but in the way he held her, careful of the life between them, fierce in his protection. Whatever darkness lived in Dominic Russo, whatever violence he was capable of, this moment was real. And Lena chose to believe that was enough. The morning of the Walsh meeting arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that seemed to mock the gravity of what was about to happen. Lena dressed in the clothes Victoria had selected, professional but not aggressive, vulnerable but not weak. The kind of outfit a scared nursing student might choose when meeting with federal agents. The surveillance equipment was invisible, the wires so sophisticated that even Walsh's security sweeps wouldn't detect it. Dominic drove her to within 2 blocks of the federal building, the most public he could risk without compromising his own security. In the back of the armored SUV, surrounded by technology that was monitoring multiple threats simultaneously, he pulled her close one final time. Remember, he said quietly, Walsh thinks she's saving you. That makes her predictable but also potentially dangerous if she suspects manipulation. Stay calm, stick to the script, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, use the distress phrase and we extract you immediately. I'll be fine, Lena tried to sound more confident than she felt. Walsh wants this too badly to be skeptical. She's been chasing you for years. The chance to finally turn an insider will blind her to the possibility that she's being played. That's what I'm counting on. But promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. You're not a trained operative. You're a nursing student who's gotten caught up in something larger than yourself. That's your strength, your authenticity. Don't try to be something you're not. She kissed him then, surprising herself with the impulse. It started as reassurance but became something deeper, a physical acknowledgement of everything unspoken between them. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic's expression carried something that looked almost like fear. Come back to me, he said. Both of you. That's all I ask. We will. Lena slipped out of the SUV, merging into foot traffic that flowed toward the federal building with the casual anonymity of any other pedestrian. Behind her, she knew Dominic's team was tracking her every step, monitoring communications, prepared to intervene if the situation deteriorated. The knowledge should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded her how much could go wrong. The federal building's security was as thorough as predicted. Metal detectors, bag searches, guards who looked at everyone like potential threats. Lena submitted to it all with the nervous cooperation of someone genuinely scared, which wasn't difficult since her heart was hammering hard enough to be visible. The surveillance equipment passed inspection exactly as Dominic's tech team had promised, its components too sophisticated to register on the building's outdated scanners. Agent Walsh met her on the third floor, looking simultaneously triumphant and concerned. Lena, thank you for coming. I know this wasn't an easy decision. She gestured toward a conference room that screamed federal government, bland walls, uncomfortable chairs, cameras recording from multiple angles. We have a lot to discuss. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Walsh started gentle, asking about Lena's well-being, the baby's health, whether she felt safe making this decision. Then she shifted into intelligence gathering. What had Lena observed at the estate? What had she overheard? What could she testify to about Dominic's operations? Lena fed her carefully prepared information, mixing truth with strategic omission, always pointing Walsh toward the Antonov corruption without explicitly naming it. I found these in Dominic's study, Lena said, producing copies of her father's files that Victoria had prepared. They look like evidence of police corruption, officers taking money from organized crime. I think, she let her voice waver convincingly, I think this might show that my father was investigating the wrong people, that Dominic isn't the monster you think he is. Walsh studied the documents with the intensity of someone whose entire worldview was being challenged. Lena watched recognition dawn as Walsh saw names she knew, her own colleagues, contacts she'd trusted, people who'd been feeding her information about Dominic for years. Where did you get these? Walsh's voice was sharp. I told you, Dominic's study. He keeps files on everyone, everything. These were in a safe with other documents about investigations into his organization. Lena leaned forward, channeling genuine emotion into her performance. Agent Walsh, what if you've been wrong? What if the people who killed my parents aren't working for Dominic? What if they're the ones who've been pointing you at him to distract from their own operations? The hook was set. Lena could see it in the way Walsh's expression shifted from triumph to doubt, in the way her questions became more focused on the corruption evidence than on Dominic's activities. The rest of the meeting followed Victoria's script almost perfectly, Walsh pushing for Lena to wear a wire, to gather more evidence, to help build a case. Lena agreeing to everything while quietly steering the investigation toward targets who would lead Walsh to the Antonov network. When it finally ended, Walsh escorted Lena back through security with promises of protection, assurances that she'd done the right thing, warnings about the danger she was still in. They parted at the building's entrance, Walsh returning to analyze the evidence she'd been given while Lena merged back into city foot traffic. 3 blocks away, a different SUV picked her up. Alessandro drove this time, grinning with an adrenaline high that suggested the surveillance team had been pleased with her performance. Perfectly executed, he said as they navigated toward the private airfield. Walsh took the bait completely. She's already running the names through databases, starting internal investigations into her own colleagues. By tomorrow morning, she'll realize she's been compromised. By tomorrow evening, she'll be helping us instead of hunting us. And Dominic? How do we... Lena's question was cut off by her phone buzzing. A text from the man himself. You were perfect. Plane is ready. I'll see you in Montana when this is over. Stay safe. The airfield appeared less than an hour later, a small private facility that catered to people who valued discretion over amenities. The plane waiting on the tarmac was sleek and expensive, the kind of aircraft Lena had only seen in movies. Sophia was already aboard along with 2 security personnel Lena recognized from the estate. Welcome to the safest place in North America for the next 72 hours, Sophia said as Lena boarded. The Montana property is completely off-grid, secure, and stocked for a month-long stay if necessary. You'll be comfortable. But as the plane took off and the city disappeared beneath them, comfort was the last thing Lena felt. Somewhere below, Dominic was executing the final stages of an operation that would either destroy his enemies or get him killed. Walsh was unraveling years of being manipulated, discovering that her crusade against Dominic had been weaponized by the very criminals she should have been investigating. And the Antonov family was about to face legal destruction so complete that violence would be their only remaining option. The next 3 days would determine everything, whether justice could be achieved through strategy rather than bloodshed, whether Dominic's promise to choose survival over revenge would hold, whether the child Lena carried would know both parents or grow up with only stories of a father who died fighting monsters. Montana passed beneath them, vast and empty and impossibly far from the battlefield Lena had just abandoned. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the baby's movements, and silently promised that whatever happened next, they would survive. Even if it meant building a future from ashes, even if it meant learning to be whole while missing pieces of themselves. The war was just beginning, but for the first time since seeing that positive pregnancy test months ago, Lena felt like she was fighting back instead of just surviving. And that had to count for something. The Montana property revealed itself as the plane descended through mountain passes that looked like they'd been carved by ancient hands. Lena pressed her face to the window, watching dense forest give way to a valley that held a structure so carefully integrated into the landscape she almost missed it. Stone and glass blending with the natural rock formations designed to be invisible from the air unless you knew exactly where to look. The landing strip was private, barely long enough for the small jet, surrounded by wilderness that stretched for miles in every direction. As Lena descended the stairs, the silence hit her first. No city sounds, no traffic, just wind through pine trees and the distant call of birds she couldn't identify. It felt like stepping onto another planet, one where violence and federal investigations and mob families didn't exist. "Welcome to what Dominic calls his insurance policy," Sophia said, leading her toward the main house. "He bought this property 8 years ago under shell corporations so layered that even the FBI would need months to trace it to him. Only 5 people know it exists. Now 6, counting you." The interior matched the exterior's deceptive simplicity. Rustic materials hiding sophisticated technology, comfortable furniture arranged in spaces designed for both relaxation and defense. Lena noticed the bulletproof glass, the reinforced doors, the security cameras disguised as light fixtures. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, Dominic had built a fortress. Her phone buzzed as they entered what Sophia called the safe room, though it looked more like a luxury apartment than any bunker Lena had imagined. A text from Dominic. "You're secure. Operation begins in 6 hours. I'll update you when I can. Trust the process. Trust the process." As if dismantling a criminal empire through legal warfare was something routine, predictable, safe. Lena wanted to text back a dozen questions, 100 fears, but settled for something simpler. "Be careful. Come back to us." His response came immediately. "Always." The first 24 hours in Montana crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena tried to distract herself with the medical textbooks Sophia had thoughtfully packed, with walks through the property's perimeter under the watchful eyes of security personnel, with preparing the nursery that someone had already set up in one of the guest rooms. But her mind kept returning to the city, to Dominic orchestrating attacks on multiple fronts, to Walsh discovering she'd been manipulated, to the Antonov family realizing their empire was collapsing. Updates came in fragments, text messages from Alessandro that were probably cleared through layers of encryption. Financial freeze executed successfully, $200 million plus in assets now inaccessible. Then, 2 hours later, SDNY prosecutors confirmed receipt of texts as evidence packages, initial warrants being prepared. And finally, near midnight of the first day, Victoria's civil suits filed in 3 jurisdictions. Discovery demands served. No going back now. But nothing from Dominic himself. Just silence that felt heavier with each passing hour. Lena was watching dawn break over the mountains when her phone finally rang. Not a text, an actual call from a number she didn't recognize. Her hand shook as she answered. "Lena." Dominic's voice sounded rough, exhausted, but alive. "Are you somewhere you can talk privately?" She moved to the terrace, nodding to the security guard who'd been maintaining respectful distance. "I'm here. Are you okay? What's happening?" The operation is 90% successful. The Antonovs' assets are frozen, federal warrants have been issued for Dmitry, Victor, and 12 other key players, and Walsh finally figured out she's been investigating the wrong organization for 3 years. She's cooperating now, full immunity deal in exchange for testimony about the corruption in her own department. Relief flooded through Lena so intensely she had to sit down. So it's over? They're going to prison? Not yet. Something in his tone made her stomach clench. Dmitry and Victor went to ground before the warrants could be served. Alexei surrendered immediately, already negotiating a deal. But the dangerous ones, the true believers, they're still out there. And they know I'm responsible for destroying everything they built. Dominic, where are you right now? A pause that lasted too long. At the estate, coordinating with federal marshals, ensuring everyone who wants to surrender has safe passage to do so. But there's been complications. Before he could explain, Lena heard shouting in the background, then what sounded like gunfire. The phone went dead. She tried calling back immediately. Nothing. Tried Alessandro's number, straight to voicemail. Even texted Sophia, who was in the main house, asking for any news from the security team. The response was quick, but unhelpful. Communications from the city have gone dark, attempting to re-establish contact. The next 6 hours were the longest of Lena's life. She paced the safe room until she wore a path in the carpet, hands moving constantly to her stomach where the baby seemed to sense her distress and responded with agitated movements. Every worst-case scenario played through her mind on repeat. Dominic killed in a firefight, captured by the surviving Antonovs, arrested by overzealous federal agents who didn't understand he was cooperating. When her phone finally rang again, it was Alessandro, and his first word sent ice through her veins. Lena, I need you to stay calm and listen carefully. Dominic is alive, but he's been injured. We're transporting him to the Montana property now. Medical team is meeting us en route. How bad? She was already moving toward the door, her nursing training overriding panic. What are his injuries? Is he stable? Gunshot wound to the shoulder, through and through, no arterial damage. He's conscious, stable, and extremely annoyed that I'm telling you before he could do it himself. But he needs somewhere secure to recover, and the estate is currently crawling with federal agents processing evidence. Montana is the only option. Lena forced herself to think clinically, to compartmentalize the terror and focus on what mattered. How long until you arrive? 4 hours by plane, then another 30 minutes by helicopter to the property. I'm sending ahead his medical records and current vitals. Your nursing background is about to be very useful. The medical team arrived an hour before Dominic did. 2 doctors and a nurse practitioner who looked like they'd spent careers patching up people who couldn't go to regular hospitals. They set up an impromptu surgical suite in one of the bedrooms with equipment that had clearly been pre-positioned for exactly this kind of emergency. Lena worked alongside them, falling into the familiar rhythms of trauma response, grateful for something productive to do with her fear. The helicopter touched down in the valley clearing as afternoon light painted the mountains gold. Lena watched from the terrace as Alessandro and 2 security personnel carried a stretcher toward the house. Even from a distance, she could see blood soaking through makeshift bandages, could see the way Dominic's jaw was clenched against pain. She met them at the door, fighting the urge to throw herself at him in favor of professional assessment. Get him to the surgical suite. I need vitals, blood type confirmation, and someone tell me exactly what happened. Later, Dominic managed, his voice strained but steady. Take care of the shoulder first. Yell at me for getting shot second. The next 3 hours blurred into the controlled chaos of emergency medicine. The bullet had indeed passed through cleanly, missing major blood vessels but causing significant tissue damage. The doctors worked with practiced efficiency while Lena assisted, her hands steady despite the fact that this was the father of her child bleeding under surgical lights. She monitored vitals, anticipated equipment needs, and occasionally met Dominic's eyes to find him watching her with something that looked like wonder mixed with pain medication. Finally, the lead doctor stepped back. He'll live, needs rest, antibiotics, physical therapy for the shoulder, and at least 2 weeks before he should even think about strenuous activity. But barring infection, he'll make a full recovery. Relief hit Lena so hard she had to grip the table edge. Thank you, all of you. The medical team cleaned up with professional discretion, leaving supplies and instructions for wound care before disappearing to whatever quarters had been prepared for them. Alessandro hovered in the doorway, looking guilty. "What happened?" Lena demanded once they were alone. "You said the operation was successful. Where did the shooting come from?" "Dimitri and Victor made one final play," Alessandro explained. "Attacked the estate with what was left of their organization, maybe 15 people total, all of them desperate. They knew they were finished, knew prison was inevitable, decided to go out with violence." He glanced at Dominic, who was fighting to stay conscious despite the medication. "Your brother put himself between them and the federal agents who were there processing evidence, saved 6 lives, including 2 prosecutors." "Because I'm trying to actually be legitimate for once," Dominic slurred slightly, the painkillers clearly kicking in. "Can't become a respectable businessman if I let federal prosecutors get murdered on my property. Bad for the reputation I'm trying to build." "What happened to Dimitri and Victor?" Lena asked. "Federal custody. Both surrendered when they realized the assault had failed. They're facing enough charges to guarantee life sentences: murder, trafficking, attempted murder of federal officers." "It's over, Lena. Actually over this time." Alessandro moved toward the door. "I'll let you two talk. Or more likely, let you yell at him while he's too drugged to effectively argue back." Alone with Dominic in the quiet room, Lena finally let herself feel everything she'd been compartmentalizing. The fear, the relief, the anger at him for getting shot, the gratitude that he'd survived. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful of his injured shoulder, and let tears she'd been holding back for days finally fall. "Hey," Dominic said softly, his good hand finding hers. "I promised I'd come back. Didn't specify in what condition, but I'm here." "You got shot." Her voice broke. "You promised you'd choose survival over revenge, and you got shot anyway." "I chose protecting people over running away. There's a difference." He squeezed her hand with surprising strength, considering the medication. "Those prosecutors didn't deserve to die because they were brave enough to take on the Antonovs. The federal agents were just doing their jobs. I couldn't let Dimitri kill them to make a point. So you made yourself a target instead." "So I did what my father never would have. I chose to protect law enforcement rather than fight them. That's character growth, right? Isn't that what you wanted? Me being better than the empire I inherited?" Despite everything, Lena almost laughed. "You're impossible. Even bleeding and high on painkillers, you're still trying to win arguments." "I'm trying to make you understand that I meant what I said. About wanting to be worthy of your trust. About building something different." His eyes were already starting to close, exhaustion and medication pulling him under. "I love you, Lena. Been trying not to say it because it felt too fast, too complicated, too much like the kind of vulnerability my father warned against. But I was bleeding in a helicopter thinking I might not get another chance. So I'm saying it now. I love you. Love our child. Love the future I see when I imagine us together." The words hit Lena like a physical force. She'd been so focused on survival, on strategy, on making it through each crisis as it came, that she hadn't let herself examine what she felt. But looking at him now, injured, protecting people he could have easily let die, choosing legal solutions over violence, even when violence would have been easier, building something redemptive from a legacy of crime, she found an answer she hadn't known she was looking for. "I love you too," she whispered, which is terrifying and probably terrible judgment on my part, but it's true. "I love who you're trying to become, who you already are when you let yourself be human instead of hiding behind the crime lord facade." Dominic smiled, the expression soft and genuine. "Good, that's good. We can build on that. After I sleep for approximately 3 days and learn to use my arm again." He was unconscious within minutes, his breathing evening out into the deep rhythms of healing sleep. Lena sat with him through the night, monitoring his vitals with professional attention, while her mind raced with everything that had changed. The Antonovs were in custody. Walsh was cooperating rather than investigating. Dominic had survived his war and chosen protection over vengeance. And somehow, impossibly, she'd fallen in love with a man who'd spent his adult life running a criminal empire. The days that followed developed their own rhythm. Mornings, Lena would help change Dominic's bandages and administer antibiotics, falling back on nursing training to manage his recovery. Afternoons, they'd sit on the terrace while Alessandro provided updates from the city, trials being prepared, assets being liquidated, the systematic dismantling of what remained of the Antonov organization. Evenings, they'd talk about futures that suddenly felt possible, what it would mean for Dominic to actually go legitimate, whether his organization could be transformed into something legal, how to raise a child when one parent had spent years operating outside the law. 2 weeks into recovery, Dominic's phone rang during one of these evening conversations. He glanced at the screen, eyebrows rising. "It's Agent Walsh. Should I answer?" "Put it on speaker," Lena said. "I want to hear this." Walsh's voice came through crisp and professional. "Mr. Russo, I'm calling to inform you that the Southern District of New York has officially declined to pursue charges against you in connection with the Antonov investigation. In exchange for your cooperation in their prosecution, they're offering full immunity for any activities related to the evidence you provided." Dominic and Lena exchanged glances. "And the other investigations?" he asked carefully. "Those are being handled separately, but between you and me, the Bureau has bigger fish to fry than someone who's actively divesting from criminal enterprises and cooperating with federal prosecutors. Your lawyer has the details, but the short version is you're clear. On everything." Walsh paused. "I owe you an apology. And Lena, I was so focused on making a case against you that I didn't see the actual criminals operating right under my nose. Your father would be proud of how this turned out. Both of you." After the call ended, silence settled over the terrace. Then Lena started laughing, the sound edged with hysteria and relief in equal measure. "You did it! You actually did it! Destroyed your enemies and got federal immunity in the process." "We did it," Dominic corrected. "Your willingness to meet with Walsh to play double agent while pregnant and terrified, that's what made the difference. You finished what your father started. Made his death mean something." The baby kicked, hard enough that Dominic felt it through Lena's shirt. His good hand moved to her stomach, expression transforming into something wondering. "Does that hurt?" "Not hurt exactly, just insistent, like she's already got opinions about things." Lena covered his hand with hers. "We should probably start seriously discussing names. Can't keep calling her the baby forever." "Sophia," Dominic said without hesitation. "After my grandmother, the only person in my family who ever told me I could be something other than what my father wanted. She'd have liked you, would have said you were exactly the kind of stubborn that keeps men like me from becoming monsters." Sophia Carter Russo. Lena tested the name, finding it fit perfectly. "I like it. Strong but elegant. Exactly what she'll need to be, growing up with us as parents." The next month passed in a kind of domestic peace Lena had never experienced. They turned the Montana property into an actual home rather than just a safe house, preparing the nursery with care that had nothing to do with security protocols and everything to do with creating a space worthy of their daughter. Dominic's shoulder healed slowly but steadily, physical therapy sessions gradually restoring range of motion. Alessandro visited weekly with updates that showed Dominic's organization transforming exactly as promised, criminal enterprises being sold or shut down, legitimate businesses being expanded, a transition that would take years but had genuinely begun. Lena returned to her medical textbooks, determined to finish her degree, even if it meant completing coursework remotely. She'd come too far, sacrificed too much, to abandon the career she'd worked toward. Dominic supported this completely, arranging for private tutors and online courses that would let her graduate on schedule despite the chaos of the previous months. One evening, 6 weeks into their Montana exile, Dominic found her in the nursery, arranging tiny clothes that Sophia had ordered from catalogs that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent used to. He moved up behind her, his healing shoulder allowing him to wrap both arms around her now. "I have something to show you," he said quietly. "Alessandro sent files today, the final pieces of the transition." They moved to the study where Dominic pulled up documents on his laptop, legal filings showing the dissolution of shell corporations, the sale of questionable businesses, the establishment of a legitimate investment firm that would manage his remaining assets. But the document he highlighted showed something different, a charitable foundation being established in her parents' names, funded with $10 million, dedicated to supporting victims of human trafficking and corruption in law enforcement. "The Carter Foundation," Lena read, tears blurring the words. Dominic, this is not enough. It'll never be enough to make up for what they went through, what you lost. But it's something. A way to make sure other families don't experience what yours did. A way to honor what your father died trying to do. He turned her to face him. I want to do this right, Lena. Want to build something we can be proud of, something Sophia won't have to hide from when people ask what her father does. You're really going legitimate. Actually, completely legitimate. As much as someone with my history can. There are things I've done that I can't undo, blood on my hands that won't wash clean. But I can choose who I am from this point forward, and I choose to be someone worthy of you, of our daughter. He paused, then pulled a small box from his pocket with the kind of nervousness that looked foreign on his usually confident face. Which is a terrible segue to this, but I've never been good at romantic gestures, so bear with me. Lena's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring. Elegant, understated, a single diamond set in platinum that caught the light like captured starlight. I know this is complicated, Dominic said, the words coming fast like he was afraid she'd interrupt. I know we've only known each other a few months, most of which has been crisis management and survival mode. I know you have every reason to be cautious about tying yourself to someone with my past, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man you deserve, the father Sophia deserves. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Build this legitimate life together? Give us a chance to be something other than just connected by biology and circumstance? Lena looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, then at the documents on the screen showing a criminal empire being systematically transformed into something that could face daylight without shame. She thought about her father, who'd believed in justice enough to risk everything. About her mother, who'd supported that belief even knowing the danger. About the baby growing inside her, who deserved parents brave enough to choose love over fear. Yes, she said, surprising herself with how certain the answer felt. Yes, I'll marry you. Build this life together. Figure out how to make legitimate business and foundation work, and raising a daughter coexist with physical therapy and finishing nursing school. It's going to be complicated and messy and probably involve more crises than either of us can predict. But yes. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with the kind of tenderness that made her forget everything except this moment. This man, this choice, this future they were building from impossibly complicated pieces. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Montana property, with Alessandro as best man and Sophia tearfully managing every detail. Agent Walsh sent congratulations and a card that arrived with federal approval stamps, which somehow felt perfectly appropriate. The foundation was officially launched the same week, with Lena appointed to the board despite her protests that she knew nothing about running charitable organizations. You know what it means to lose parents to violence and corruption, Dominic had argued. You know what support would have meant to you in that aftermath. That's more valuable than any business degree. Sophia Rose Carter Russo was born on a crisp October morning, arriving 3 weeks early with the kind of dramatic timing that suggested she'd inherited her father's flair for making entrances. Lena labored for 18 hours with Dominic at her side, his hand probably bearing permanent damage from how hard she'd gripped it. But when the doctors finally placed their daughter in her arms, tiny, perfect, screaming her displeasure at the world with impressive volume, Lena found herself crying for completely different reasons than she'd expected. This wasn't grief or fear or relief that the ordeal was over. This was joy, pure and uncomplicated, at the realization that from all the violence and loss and impossible choices, something this beautiful had emerged. Dominic touched his daughter's face with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect. She's going to be a handful, Lena corrected, already recognizing stubborn determination in the baby's expression. Look at that face. That's the face of someone who's going to give us trouble from day one. Good. The world needs more women who cause trouble, who refuse to accept things as they are and demand better. He leaned down to kiss first Sophia's forehead, then Lena's. Thank you for trusting me, for giving us this chance, for being brave enough to choose a future that didn't look anything like what you'd planned. Over the following months, they developed rhythms that felt almost normal. Dominic split time between Montana and the city, managing the transition of his business interests while Lena focused on completing her nursing degree remotely and learning to be a mother. The foundation grew, funding programs across the country, making a real difference in ways that felt like honoring her parents' memory. Alessandro took over day-to-day operations of the legitimate investment firm, showing surprising talent for legal business. Victoria became the foundation's chief legal counsel, using her prosecutorial experience to navigate the complex regulations governing charitable work. Even Sophia found her place, managing the Montana property and providing the kind of grandmother presence that both Dominic and Lena's childhoods had lacked. On Sophia's first birthday, they gathered at the Montana property for a celebration that felt like marking more than just a child's milestone. It was the anniversary of choosing to trust rather than run, to build rather than destroy, to believe that even the darkest beginnings could lead to something worth celebrating. Lena stood on the terrace holding their daughter while Dominic talked with Alessandro about expansion plans for the foundation, about legitimate business opportunities, about a future that no longer required looking over their shoulders for threats that might emerge from the past. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, and Sophia giggled at the colors in that way babies had of finding joy in simple beauty. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, appearing at her side and slipping an arm around her waist. "That a year ago I was terrified I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, that trusting you meant becoming complicit in everything I'd been raised to oppose, that this baby would grow up paying for our choices." Lena leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth that had become her definition of safety. "Now I'm thinking we actually did it. Built something real from all that chaos. Proved that people can change if they're motivated by the right reasons." "You mean love?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes serious. "I mean family. The kind you choose, not the kind you inherit. The kind built on trust and honesty, rather than fear and obligation." She looked up at him. "My father died trying to stop monsters. You helped finish that work while becoming something other than the monster you were raised to be. Our daughter gets to grow up in a world where both of those truths coexist. That feels like the kind of legacy worth building a life around." Sophia chose that moment to reach for her father, demanding his attention with the imperious confidence of someone who'd never known a moment of her parents' love being conditional. Dominic took her carefully, his technique much improved from the terrified new father who'd been afraid to hold her wrong. She grabbed his nose and pulled, laughing at his exaggerated wince. "She's going to be trouble," he repeated Lena's prediction from the delivery room. "The best kind," Lena agreed. Inside the house, the party continued. Alessandro telling stories that made Sophia laugh, the security team who'd become family sharing food and conversation, the medical team who'd patched Dominic back together raising glasses to the baby they'd helped bring into the world. It was the kind of gathering that would have been impossible a year ago, when trust was scarce and survival uncertain. But standing on that terrace, watching sunset paint the mountains while holding the family they'd built from impossible circumstances, Lena felt something she'd thought lost forever the night her parents died. Hope. Not the naive kind that ignored darkness, but the earned kind that had survived darkness and found light on the other side. Dominic kissed the top of her head, his free arm pulling her close. "I love you, both of you, more than I knew it was possible to love anything." "We love you too," Lena said, meaning it with her entire being. "Even when you're impossible and stubborn and think you know better than everyone else." "Especially then," he corrected, grinning. Sophia babbled something that might have been agreement or might have just been baby sounds, but they chose to interpret as approval. The sun finished setting, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance wolves sang to the moon. The sound should have been ominous, a reminder of predators and danger. Instead, it felt like the world acknowledging their place in it, survivors who'd earned their peace, fighters who'd chosen to build rather than destroy. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain in specifics but clear in its foundation. Dominic would continue transforming his empire into something their daughter wouldn't need to hide from. Lena would finish her nursing degree and find ways to combine medical knowledge with foundation work, helping victims of the kind of violence that had taken her parents. Sophia would grow up knowing both her parents had chosen to be better than their circumstances, had fought for justice even when the path was complicated and morally ambiguous. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments when the past threatened to overwhelm the present. But they'd face it together, this family, built by choice rather than chance, bound by love that had survived impossible tests. And that, Lena thought as Dominic led her back inside to rejoin their chosen family, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The door closed behind them, sealing them inside warmth and light, and the kind of joy that comes from surviving darkness together. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unmoved, keeping their secrets, bearing witness to another story of redemption written in the language of second chances and stubborn hope. Some stories end in tragedy, others in triumph. This one ended in the quiet certainty that even from secrets and violence and impossible choices, something beautiful could emerge. If you were brave enough to trust, strong enough to change, and wise enough to recognize that family wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other every single day and building something worth fighting for from whatever materials life provided. They'd done exactly that. And in doing so, they'd proved that the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures. As long as you were willing to do the work, face the truth, and believe that love was stronger than the legacy of violence that tried to define you. Sophia's laughter echoed through the house, pure and joyful and completely unaware of everything her parents had sacrificed to give her this life. That innocence, that joy, that absolute certainty that she was loved and safe, that was what they'd fought for. And it was worth every impossible choice, every terrifying moment, every time they'd chosen trust over fear. It was, Lena realized with absolute certainty, worth everything.